Why, hello folks. It's a new year, so I figured I was going to do a thing that some other people are also doing, which is making a sort of Warframe tier list, if you will, or a Warframe review, going over the roster and sort of like throwing my suggestions for what's good, what's bad, what you should be farming for, what you might be overlooking, and what you might want to check out if you haven't tried it out already. So I'm going to give a sort of a different spin to it, my perspective on it. I have a number of criterion that I am going to use to rate different Warframes, and those criterions are going to be first, how easy or hard they are to farm for, or how hard they are to obtain. That's going to be part of like my review of them, because I think that's actually like useful information for, in particular for new players, to know if like just, is this a Warframe that I can get reasonably easy, or is it going to be like a huge project to get my hands on this Warframe? For that reason, I'm going to say that any Warframe that I list as like 3 stars or higher when it comes to easy to obtain, you should not buy that with Platinum. You can get that without much hassle. If I rate it as maybe 2 or 1 on easy to obtain, you might want to think about actually buying that Warframe with Platinum instead, if you are so inclined to actually spend Platinum on the game. But other than that, it's like, I'm not going to assume that you're going to buy them with Platinum. I'm going to assume that you're going to farm for most of the stuff in this game. So that's going to be part of the rating. Second ranking, how beginner-friendly is this Warframe? Because I think that matters. Some Warframes can be very complex. Some Warframes require a lot of like mod setup, and you have to know how to build them. You have to understand how certain abilities interact with each other. You might need to have like augment mods that you get from syndicates to actually sort of like get the most out of their ability kit. And some Warframes are very straightforward, very easy to get the hang of and understand how they work, and just more accessible for a new player. So that is also going to be part of how I evaluate Warframes. My third criterion is utility. And by utility, I kind of mean how useful they are in general for different mission types, different scenarios, helping out a squad with various things. So you can get a high score in utility either if you're really, really good at one thing, or if you're kinda generally useful and pretty good at several different things. If you get a low utility score, that usually means that you are pretty much only helping yourself, and you're not really helping the team out all that much with what they might need in a particular mission type. After that, I will judge Warframes based on raw power, and just how high they can push damage numbers, basically. And I think most, or maybe not most, but at least some of these tier lists that you see, I think put too much of a focus on this stat. That they judge Warframes basically almost exclusively based on how powerful they are, and how much damage they can dish out, and how much of the total percentage damage in a certain mission you will do, or how to high levels you can push it in terms of damage. I don't think that's the only thing a Warframe should be judged on, because, you know, these high level endurance runs in Steel Path that go up to levels in the thousands and stuff, it's just, it's relevant information for such a small subset of all players, and it's like most Warframes can do most things in this game, and I think it's a bit overvalued as a stat. But I'm going to include it anyway. I'm going to include it, but I'm going to only have it as a part of my evaluation. It's not the entirety of it. And the final stat, and might be, like, in my eyes, maybe the most important thing to consider, is how fun they are to play. How fun is the gameplay loop? How active are you with your ability use? How much does the Warframe stand out from others and sort of feel unique in their gameplay and just gives you something fresh and new that the others don't give you? I actually put a lot of value into that as a stat. So yeah, those are the 5 criteria. I'm going to repeat them again because this is how I'm going to evaluate all Warframes. I'm going to evaluate him based on how easy they are to obtain, how beginner-friendly they are, what utility they have, how much raw power they have, and how fun they are to play. I also have one more caveat that I need to mention when it comes to these ratings. I am rating these Warframes based on their base abilities. I am not including the helmet system in these ratings, and how much you can improve Warframes if you can sort of like replace one ability for another and stuff like that. If I were to include the helmet system in these ratings, some of these Warframes would be rated pretty differently from how I'm rating them today. Probably when I'm going to do this next year, for 2022, when I have had time to experiment with the helmet system for pretty much every Warframe in the game. At that point, I'm probably going to include that in my rankings for determining how good or bad different Warframes are. But for now, we're just looking at their base kit and the abilities they start out the game with. So, let's get started and go through the list of all 46 Warframes currently in the game, and I'm going to review them in the order in which they were released in the game. So the newest Warframes are going to come last in this list, and the oldest Warframes are going to come first. So let's get started. So first up, we have the poster boy for the game, Excalibur. And in this, I also included the later version Excalibur Umbra, who has slightly different abilities in some regards, but he mostly functions the same. Yeah, this is one of the 3 starter Warframes. So obviously, when I'm gonna rank it by how easy it is to obtain, this gets a 5 out of 5. You just get it for free, right? If that's the one you pick, and even if you don't pick him as your starter Warframe, he's one of the earliest Warframes in the game that you can farm for, because his parts drop from the boss fight on Mars, which doesn't take all that long to get to. So, he's very easy to obtain, not a whole lot of problems there. You can get your hands on him without any hassle. Beginner friendly, once again, I'm going to rank Excalibur as 5 out of 5. He is very straightforward in how he functions. He has his slash dash, which is just, you zoom forward and you slash, you hit them with your exalted blade. They do, like, it's not very complicated to understand what this ability does. Radial blind is also very easy to get your head around. You just stun enemies around you, and then you open them up for finishers, so you can do them with finishers, and they can't shoot you for a while they're stunned. Easy peasy. Radial javelin is probably the only ability that is a bit more complicated, and probably his least used ability. And then finally you have the Exalted Blade, which is just, yeah, you get a super strong sword. It does these slashes that go forward and kill things. It's very strong. It's very easy for a new player to get their hang of how you're supposed to play Excalibur. He's melee, you slash things with your sword. That's basically it. Not that complicated. When it comes to utility, he ranks lower. He ranks at 2 out of 5. Because, hey, guess what? He is a bit limited in what he's useful for. He doesn't have any specializations when it comes to spy missions, when it comes to defensive type missions. He's pretty good at killing things, and that's basically what he can do. So, when it comes to different mission types, you're not going to be the star player. You're going to do fine, you're going to kill things, but your squad isn't going to get a whole lot out of the Excalibur being there. So, unfortunately, not a utility player. In terms of raw power, 3 out of 5. He's kind of in the middle of the pack. His Exalted Blade is strong. He can kill things pretty good with that. It does taper off when it comes to the highest levels. There's a limit to when he sort of stops being useful with that. His Radial Blind is pretty damn good, and it can kill things. It can stun things, but there are way more powerful Warframes in the game. And finally, when it comes to fun to play, I'm going to put him again at the middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. He is straightforward. It's always fun to pull out that Exalted Blade and just going ham and slashing people with your melee weapon. I like that, I enjoy that, and the upgraded form, the Excalibur Umbra, also has the added benefit of, you know, moving by itself and just like doing stuff on its own, which is kind of cool. So yeah, that's about it for Excalibur. That's what he can do. Next up, we have Volt, another one of the 3 starter Warframes, who's got the electricity powers, the Zappy Zaps. When it comes to how easy he is to obtain, again, 5 out of 5, you literally get him for free when you start the game. If you do not pick him as your starter Warframe, he is accessible through clan dojo research. You can just go to your clan if you're in a clan. If you're not in a clan, join one. Go to the Tenno lab and just get the blueprints for him and his component parts as research. And then you can just craft him. So very easy to obtain. Beginner friendly, I'm gonna rate him at 3 out of 5. He is a bit more complex than Excalibur, and it takes sort of a little bit of, you know, experimentation to understand just how he works. He's got the shock, which is, you know, pretty straightforward. You zap enemies, it chains to nearby enemies, sure. You got his speed, which is very, very strong in, you know, later stages of the game when you can start modding him properly. But for a new player, you're probably not going to use this all that much. He's got the electric shield, which also, it's good, but it's a bit complicated, and it doesn't sort of explain itself that well in terms of what it actually does. You plant it on the ground, sure, it stays on the ground. You can pick it up and carry it with you, but then you can only shoot with your pistol because it takes up one of your hands. But the most important thing is that it gives you a damage boost if you shoot through it. You can kind of see it there on the list, but it doesn't really explain itself. So if you plop down a shield and then shoot through it, it provides a damage bonus and your shots get better. And then he has his discharge, which just, you know, pulsing electricity to everything around him. If you mod this correctly, it's very strong for certain, you know, mission types. But all of these sort of like take a bit of care and they take a little bit of build around. And for a new player who doesn't have like maybe like all of the things you need, it's not gonna feel as powerful as maybe an Excalibur will. So 3 out of 5. In terms of utility, Volt is a definite 5 out of 5. This guy is absolutely a utility player. His speed, it does not just hit him, it also gives a speed bonus to all allies who are in range. So you're buffing the speed of all your teammates as well. For exterminate missions or missions, relic missions, where you just want to blaze through them as fast as you can, this helps a lot, and your teammates are gonna love you for it. His shields that you can shoot through to provide damage is one of the things that makes him a key player in Eidolon hunts, and just something that he can do that not a whole lot of other Warframes can do. Any Warframe, it does not just Volt, any Warframe can shoot through these shields to get a damage bonus to whatever they hit that's on the other side. His discharge is great for game modes like Sanctuary Onslaught, where you just have to clear out hordes upon hordes upon hordes of trash mobs. And you can, as a Volt, you can just carry an entire team through multiple zones just by yourself. So this guy is an absolute utility player. He's great in a team. 5 out of 5. In terms of raw power, I'm going to rank him about the same as Excalibur. I'm going to put him at 3 out of 5. He does have his, you know, uses for Eidolon hunt, stuff like that, where you can have a sniper rifle and shoot through the shields, and that's very powerful. But in terms of just other game modes, he isn't really built for super damage, right? He can do a lot of things, but when it comes to just wiping out enemies with millions of billions of damage, that's not really what you're gonna use a Volt for. He's about middle of the pack, nothing spectacular. He's not weak, but he's not super strong either. And finally, in terms of being fun to play, I'm gonna rank him a bit higher. I'm gonna put him at 4 out of 5, just because he has a lot of things going for him in his kit. He has the super speed, which is nice. He has the discharge that can wipe big mobs if you build specifically for that. I think the shield is a bit clunky. I don't really enjoy using the shield all that much in normal missions. But it's good for Eidolon hunts, as I said. But basically just the speed boost itself, which is just so nice, puts him a bit higher than average in terms of just how fun he is to play. So yeah, 4 out of 5. Next up we have Mag, the third and final starter Warframe, the Magnetic Warframe. So obviously, just like with Excalibur and Volt, in terms of how easy she is to obtain, 5 out of 5. She's one of the starter Warframes. You don't pick her as a starter, you can farm for her when you get to Phobos, which is very early in the game, and you also farm for her from the easiest boss in the entire game, the Sergeant. So, Mag, very easy to obtain, 5 out of 5. Beginner friendly, I'm gonna rank her super low, 1 out of 5. She is actually pretty complicated to get a hang of for a new player. Just understanding how her different abilities work, how they interact with each other. She's a bit complex. She's a bit complex for a starter Warframe. You have your pull. Yeah, you pull enemies in. Probably her least useful ability. But that's a thing. It just increases their drop chances. I don't know. It's not but her later abilities are the interesting ones. Magnetize is a very good ability. Just creating this field that sucks enemies in, and you shoot into the field to do more damage and stuff. Like it's complicated how this ability works, but it's a very, very strong ability. Polarize, depleting enemy shields and armor. Just letting her armor strip, stuff like that. It's very strong, but it's not really self-explanatory for a beginner. Exactly how you're supposed to utilize this, right? Creating shards when you mix them with Magnetize. So she has abilities that you have to sort of like combine, and they synergize with each other, rather than just being good by themselves and working the way they're supposed to by themselves, like Excalibur and Volt has. It's just, she's a bit tricky to get a hang of as a new player. She requires more out of you in just learning ability synergies and stuff. So not that beginner friendly at all, actually. 1 out of 5. 1 out of 5. Utility, I'm gonna put her at 3 out of 5. She's somewhere in the middle of the pack. Her Magnetize is very helpful for like just, you know, defensive stuff, and she can definitely dish out damage. But she's not spectacular in this area, I'm gonna say. She's good. She's good as a utility player, but not great. Not bad either. Middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. Raw power, 5 out of 5. Mag is a powerhouse in the late game, end game stuff, when you know how to build her correctly and you sort of like have all the gear you need. Out of all the 3 starter Warframes, she is by far the most powerful one out of them, even if that's not entirely apparent, maybe as you just get her as a beginner. But the potential is there, and she can do ridiculous things. Absolutely ridiculous things when you reach the end stages of the game. So yeah, very powerful Warframe. One of the more powerful Warframes in the entire game. Finally, when it comes to fun to play, I'm gonna put her pretty high as well. Because she can just do so many cool things. Magnetizing enemies, pulling enemies in, doing wacky stuff with like firing into the magnetic field, and just like, and also there is something to be said for just being able to kill things oh so quickly and also devastatingly as Mag can. So she's pretty fun to play as well, and for a lot of like sort of like more experienced players and endgame players, she's popular. She's a very popular Warframe. So yeah, that's Mag. Next up we have Loki, who used to be one of the starter Warframes, but isn't anymore. When it comes to how easy he is to obtain, I'm putting him at 4 out of 5. He is not that hard to farm for. You just have to get to Uranus, and once you're there, just fight the boss fight there against the hyena pack. It's not that complicated. It doesn't take all that long to get a Loki. He's easy to farm for. 4 out of 5. In terms of being beginner friendly, I'm gonna rate him at 3 out of 5. Pretty much middle of the pack here. He does take some getting used to and figuring out, but he's not the most complex Warframe in the game. You got your decoy. You can put out a decoy that draws fire. Okay. You can make yourself invisible. Very straightforward. That's just it. You make yourself invisible. You got your switch teleport, which is a bit more complex, I guess, but actually pretty useful at times. You can swap places with an enemy. Yeah, that's what you can do. You can do some cool stuff with this. And finally, you got the radial disarm, which is just, you know, you hit a bunch of enemies around you and they lose their weapons permanently. That's pretty strong and, you know, not that complex either. So you know, he's got 4 abilities that all have different uses, but they're not super complex to get your head around. So yeah, 3 out of 5. When it comes to utility, I'm gonna again put Loki at 3 out of 5. He does have his uses. Being invisible means automatically that he's great for spy missions and missions that require stealth. His switch teleport is actually pretty good in certain scenarios. And guess what? Radial disarm is a very strong ability. Being able to permanently disarm enemies and so they can't shoot and are forced to revert to melee combat is actually quite potent. Not to mention, combined with his passive, that makes it so that he can, you know, he can stick to walls and wall latch for very long periods of time. And enemies who you have disarmed, who only have melee weapons and they don't have guns, they can't do a whole lot toward you while you're hanging from the walls. So he can do some stuff. He's absolutely, like, not useless in missions. But at the same time, the most common criticism against Loki is that he has become sort of, you know, out of date. That currently there are other Warframes in the game that can do basically anything that he can do, but better. There is some truth to that. There's some truth to that. But that doesn't mean that he can't do stuff. He's still a player. 3 out of 5. When it comes to raw power, I'm going to rank him above average. I'm going to put him at 4 out of 5. And mostly because of the invisibility and the radial disarm. Switch teleport can do some wonky stuff as well. But his kit is pretty strong. Like he is not to be underestimated. He has one really bad ability, which is decoy. It's kind of useless, but his other 3 abilities all, you know, they are very useful and they can let him do some pretty hardcore stuff. So don't underestimate Loki. Don't sleep on him. 4 out of 5. And finally, in terms of how fun he is to play, I'm again going to put him at 4 to 5. He's got a cool gameplay. He is a stealth frame who can move freely while being stealth. He's not like, you know, forced to be slower or something, like an Ivara. And switch teleport is fun. It is fun to just zip zoop and switch places with enemies and you know, having a very active playstyle. And, you know, being able to disarm enemies, again, feels good. It's an ability that's strong and it feels nice to use. I like Loki. He's fun to play. 4 to 5. Next up, we have Rhino. Rhino, who is one of the most popular Warframes in the game. Easy to obtain, 5 out of 5. So one of the reasons for his popularity is that out of the non-starter Warframes, he's probably the easiest one to get. So for a lot of new players, Rhino is going to be the first Warframe that you actually craft. You get him from the boss fight on Venus. That's where you farm for his parts. And that is the 2nd planet in the star chart. So that's very early in the game. It's not a very hard boss fight. You can just farm until you get him. Crafting him requires some materials that you can get at Mars. So, you know, it's very early. 5 out of 5. Very easy to get. Beginner friendly. 5 out of 5. This guy is very easy to get a hang of. He's got a charge ability. It knocks down enemies. Not complicated. He has got his iron skin. You activate it and you become invulnerable. He's got roar. You activate it. You deal more damage for a time. It's easy. He's got a stomp. You stomp everything around you. They fly into the air. They become incapacitated. It's not a complicated ability set. Very easy for a beginner to understand. 5 out of 5. Utility, I'm going to put him at a 3 out of 5. Maybe even close to 4. But I'm going to put him at 3. This is mainly thanks to his Roar, his number 3 ability that increases damage. It does not just increase damage for him, it also increases damage for everyone else who is standing close to him while he casts the ability. This is very helpful, and there are certain game modes, like for example Eidolon Hunts, where this comes in handy. Really comes in handy. But even in normal missions, it does come in handy to just, hey, give a damage buff to your entire squad. That's helpful. And his Rhino Stomp is actually not a bad crowd control ability either. Like you can stun enemies for quite some time with this if you build for duration. So yeah, you know, as a utility player, there are definitely worse Warframes out there. Raw power. This is where Rhino scores a bit lower. I'm gonna put him at 3 out of 5. There are some exceptions, and that basically comes down to survivability and tankiness. There are some weird endgame builds you can have with him that gives him such high armor values that he practically becomes immortal. That's sort of what he can do in terms of sheer power. But when it comes to damage output, not that much. He's got the damage buff from Roar, but not much else. So if you just want to like push for the highest levels and just really being able to do a lot of damage, there are far better Warframes for that than Rhino. No, he's not one of them Warframes. 3 out of 5. And finally, when it comes to being fun to play, I'm gonna rank him pretty low in terms of just what he brings to the table gameplay wise. I'm gonna put him at 2 out of 5. The reason for that is because his 2 most important abilities, Iron Skin and Roar, they are just so-called set it and forget it skills. You activate them, and then they just do their thing passively, and doesn't require anything from you. You activate Iron Skin, you just get more armor, and then you just have that. You activate Roar, and like while it's active, you just do more damage with your other stuff. So when in terms of like active ability use, he has his Charge and his Stomp, but they're not his bread and butter. So in terms of just how fun he is to play compared to some other Warframes, I'm ranking him pretty low. He's extremely beginner friendly, he's very powerful for a new player, but you're probably gonna gravitate away from him once you reach later stages of the game. He'll help you out in the beginning, but that's what he's for. Then we get to Ashe, the Ninja Warframe. Yeah! He's cool. In terms of how easy he is to obtain, pretty low, unfortunately. 2 out of 5. He is quite difficult to farm for, in that his component parts only drop from a specific enemy in the game, so-called Grineer Manics. Grineer Manics are special Grineer units that spawn in during so-called endless mission types with the Grineer. We're talking survival, we're talking disruption, stuff like that. So you're not gonna face a whole lot of Manics in a mission, and even when you do face one, a pretty low chance to drop one of his component parts, and you need all 3 different parts. So farming for an Ashe can take a lot of time. That being said, you can also just view it as a passive farm. If you just play the game for long enough, play enough missions, eventually you'll just, get all the Ashe parts by itself. It's just going to happen naturally, but it's going to take a long time. So he's actually not that easy to farm for. It's quite hard to get. 2 out of 5. Beginner friendly, middle of the pack. I'm going to say 3 out of 5. He has his shuriken that he can throw, hits enemies. It doesn't say all that much. If you have the augment for it, so that you can augment it, then you can also strip enemy armor while using it, which makes it considerably better. But just in his base kit, without any sort of augmentation, it's so-so. Smokescreen. Yeah, he can turn himself invisible. He's one of the invisible frames. He's got pretty short duration on it, but it's good. It's a good invisibility tool. Teleport, very straightforward as well. You aim at an enemy, you teleport toward it, If you hit the enemy, he gets a little bit of stun, so you can hit him with a finisher. So it's yeah, that's a good ability. And then his Blade Storm, which is a bit more complicated than the others. You summon clones, you teleport 2 enemies, and you hit them, and the clones hit them. It's like it's a bit more complex to understand how to use this and how to target enemies with this. How you're supposed to hover your reticule over them, stuff like that. So he has some stuff that is a bit more complex, which is why I put him at 3 out of 5. Utility, 4 out of 5, and that is because he is pretty goddamn strong in a couple of different departments. He is very much a damage dealer. He can dish out a lot of punishment, and being an invisibility frame, he's also very good for stealth missions, spy missions, stuff like that. So he is useful. He is useful in more ways than one. What sort of speaks against him in a utility role is that it's hard to build for different sort of things with him at the same time. You sort of have to choose how you want to build an Ashe and what you want him to be good at. But even so, I'm gonna put him in a utility slot like a bit higher than average. So 4 out of 5. Raw power, 5 out of 5. Goddamn. Like, do not sleep on Ashe and his potential for wreaking havoc. His abilities, any Warframe that is centered around like just finishers and abilities that do slash damage, stuff like that, they will be able to kill very high level content just with their ability kit. And Ashe is no different. He is very powerful. He is extremely powerful. Bit limited, but powerful. And for fun to play, I'm gonna put him at 4 out of 5. In general, I enjoy stealth Warframes, especially those who can be pretty fast and mobile and not sort of bogged down and locked into a slow play style just because they're stealthed. I like Warframes that are based around like just finishers and ninja stuff, as it were. And his Blade Storm is also a very satisfying ability to use. Yeah, Ashe is pretty fun to play, 4 out of 5. Ember, the Fire Warframe. Alright, in terms of being able to obtain her, 4 out of 5. You farm her from the boss on Saturn, Sarga's Rock. Not that hard to deal with. Pretty early in the game. Getting an Ember, not particularly difficult. Beginner friendly? I'm again gonna say like a pretty above average here, 4 out of 5. She's got an ability set that you can kind of get a hang of it pretty easily. Yeah, sure, you can shoot a fireball at enemies. That's pretty self-explanatory. Immolation, you give yourself flame armor, which gives you damage reduction. And we're gonna get to the bar, but yeah, damage reduction. Okay. Fire Blast. You hit enemies in an area around you. They get knocked back. They get their armor stripped. Okay. And finally, you know, Inferno. Just drop down meteors and hit everything around you. All of this is like very self-explanatory what it does. And, you know, you can get the hang of it pretty quickly. For all, like, with this ability set, she could pretty much have been a starter Warframe. Almost. Utility, somewhat lower than average. Somewhat lower than average. I'm gonna put her at 2 out of 5. She does have crowd control tools. Like, because, you know, setting enemies on fire, it's gonna give them a bit of a stun, and they don't like it. And she can strip defenses from enemies, stuff like that. But in terms of how you're gonna play her, she is a damage dealer. You'll see Embers mostly in exterminate missions and stuff like that, where you just want to, you know, go and kill a large amount of enemies. Not gonna see her all that much in, for example, defensive missions. So in terms of where she excels, she's good at killing things, but that's, you know, that's about it. Not all that much of a utility player, all things considered. Raw power, I'm gonna say 3 out of 5. Might be rating her a bit low here. Maybe she should be up at a 4. It's a bit, you know, it's close. But when you look at being able to like push and scale into the highest levels of content, I don't know, the Inferno, it sort of drops off in effectiveness. That's kind of not what you're going to be looking primarily at. You're more going to be into the Fire Blast and just armor stripping, stuff like that. But she can't really hang with the big boys and the big gals in the damage department. Very good at clearing enemies on lower levels. On higher levels, there are better Warframes for that. And finally, when it comes to being fun to play, oh, I'm gonna put her so high. I'm gonna 5 out of 5. Ember is a blast, no pun intended. She's great, partly because, you know, hey, guess what? Being a walking flamethrower and just burning stuff left and right is cool by itself. She fulfills that sort of power fantasy idea of a Warframe. Shooting down meteors and crashing into things and killing things, super fun, super enjoyable, super rewarding to use. And also, as you can see here, she has this immolation meter where you have to keep track of how much you are burninating yourself and how much you are overheating yourself, and you have to sort of spend some of it to not overheat too much, and you can wait until it's really high, and then your abilities get stronger when you cast them and stuff like that. It requires an active playstyle where you have to sort of pay attention to what's going on around you, and you are very, like, just aware of your abilities at all times, which is fun. It adds another layer of the gameplay. So yeah, Ember is really, really fun to play. I recommend her for that reason alone. 5 out of 5. Next up, we have Trinity, everyone's favorite lobster. In terms of how easy she is to obtain, unfortunately, pretty low in this case. I'm going to put her at 2 out of 5. Partly because you can't farm for her until you reach Pluto, which is one of the later stages of the star chart. And even so, first you have to clear missions and kill a certain enemy on those Pluto nodes to gather Animo nav beacons, which you need to access the boss fight where you can farm for her. And the boss fight where you can farm for her is quite difficult for a low level player, and it takes a long time to kill that boss. So it's actually a bit of a hassle to grind for her. She's not the easiest Warframe to get. 2 out of 5. In terms of being beginner friendly, 1 out of 5. She has a very complex set of abilities, which is kind of hard for a new player to get their hang around. Where you have to target enemies with your abilities to sort of like make things happen, and you link them to you, and you can link allies to you and stuff like that. For a new player, just understanding what her abilities do and how she works can seem a bit daunting. No, she's not a beginner-friendly Warframe. 1 out of 5. Utility. Hey, 5 out of 5, because that's what she is. She is the ultimate support Warframe. That's 100% what she was made for. She is the support. She can heal you. She can replenish your shields. She can give you extra energy. She can give you overshields. She can give you damage redirection, damage reduction. She's so good at just helping out a team and just supporting everyone else and making sure that everyone has a very nice time. You couldn't ask for a better support player than a Trinity. 5 out of 5. Raw power, pretty high. Because of the energy vampire and some of her other abilities as well. The reason for that is, as you can see here, this ability, you gain energy over time when you hit and target an enemy with energy vampire. Yeah, but you also deal damage over time to that enemy. And this damage is what's called true damage. It is a damage that bypasses all defenses. So if you have pretty high power strength on your Trinity, and you, for example, use a weapon with viral damage, and you can do like viral procs on enemies so they take more damage, you can kill basically anything, right? Pretty much anything in the game with this energy vampire. So don't sleep on Trinity as a power player, because she trust me, people, even though she is primarily a support, if you build her correctly, she can hit like a truck. She's very strong. 4 out of 5. In terms of fun to play, middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. And the reason why I put her there is because it's somewhat polarizing. Some people like playing support roles and really enjoy being that part of a squad, just supporting others. Some people don't. Some people want to be the damage dealers and DPS monsters. So that, coupled with the fact that she is a bit complex to get the hang of, I'm going to say that some people are just not going to enjoy her. Some people are not going to enjoy playing Trinity. Other people are going to love her and just think she's like got the coolest kit ever. So because she's polarizing, I'm going to put her at 3 out of 5. Next up, the guy who's currently a bit of a punching bag in the community, I guess. And the people are talking about wanting him to be reworked one way or another. Frost. He's been in the game for a long time. In terms of being able to get him, very, very easy. I'm gonna put it at 5 out of 5. He's also one of the earlier Warframes you can farm for. You farm for him on the boss fight on Ceres. And that is a boss fight you're probably gonna farm a lot anyway, because there are 2 different weapons that you can also get from that boss fight, in conjunction with being a popular place for farming Orokin cells. So you're just naturally gonna get him. 5 out of 5. Very easy to farm for. In terms of being beginner friendly, I'm gonna put him above average because he's somewhat self-explanatory in what he does. He is a defensive Warframe. Yeah, you can shoot a thing that freezes enemies. You can shoot a field in front of you, a bigger wave that hits enemies and freezes them. So, like, at a glance, these things do kind of the same thing. His bread and butter, the snow globe. You plop down a snow globe. Enemies have to shoot through it. It protects things. It has its own health bar, very good for defending objects. And you got your avalanche, which is like a big AoE thing around you that freezes and shatters enemies. And as you can see also, it reduces their armor. It's not that complex, really. He's got a lot of ice stuff and ice attacks that shoot in various directions, and he's got one big ol' hefty defensive skill. So yeah, 4 out of 5. Utility, once upon a time this was higher. Today I'm gonna put him in the middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. And the reason for that is because he is a specialist. He's a specialist at defense missions, where he still has a role to play with the snow globe. One of the reasons for that is because he can plop down multiple snow globes and not just one, which means, for example, for excavation missions, he's capable of protecting multiple excavators at the same time. It's one of the few Warframes who can do this. That being said, people have pointed out that as the game has progressed and evolved, he's not that useful anymore compared to most other Warframes. He has fallen behind a bit. But he does still have a role to play, specifically in defense missions, so he's definitely not useless. One other thing that sort of pushes the rating up for me is that for pretty much most players of the game, most new players, this is gonna be the very first purely defensive Warframe that you can get your hands on. You can farm for very easy in the game, early in the game. So just having access to him as a new player is very helpful, because it allows you to have a much easier time dealing with defense missions as you continue to progress in the star chart. So at the time where you get him, he provides a very noticeable utility for you. So yeah, 3 out of 5. Raw power, I'm gonna put him at below average, 2 out of 5. There are some things he can do. The snow globe has a weird thing. You can see it in this image where if you burst the snow globe, you can send enemies flying. And if the enemies fly and hit into a wall, they actually take damage, and they take true damage. You can kill people with that. It's weird and wonky, but there are builds that exist to do that. And he does have an ability that can strip enemy armor. Armor stripping is a very sought after thing for Warframes to be able to do. Warframes that can strip armor pretty much always have some sort of advantage over Warframes that can't. So he's not useless when it comes to damage dealing, but he is behind the pack. He is severely behind the pack. So only 2 out of 5 in that regard, unfortunately. And finally, when it comes to fun to play, unfortunately, again, I have to rank him at below average, 2 out of 5. And the reason for that is because the snow globes do sort of lend themselves to a kind of stationary playstyle. If you play a Frost, you're going to spend a lot of time just standing inside of your snow globe and shooting enemies on the outside. That is the sort of the normal way of playing Frost. And a lot of players consider that to be somewhat boring. So maybe he does need a tweak here or there, because currently not the most fun gameplay loop, unfortunately. 2 out of 5. Next up we have Nyx, the Mind Freak. How hard is she to acquire? Not particularly. I'm gonna put her at 4 out of 5. You farm for her parts from so-called invasion missions, specifically the infested invasion missions. Whenever they pop up, that you can do the boss fight against Forid. It's a very easy boss fight. You can run through that mission in a couple of minutes, and every time you kill it, you get one of her parts. You can farm for her very early in the game, very easily. One of the easiest Warframes to acquire in the game. I'm gonna put her at 4 out of 5, almost 5 out of 5. Like, she's not hard at all to get your hands on. Easy to farm for. Beginner friendly? No, not really. 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5. For a new player, she might be a bit tricky to get your hang of how you're supposed to play her, because all of her abilities do like a couple of different things. Mind control. Yeah, you take over the mind of an enemy, and then you're supposed to like shoot the enemy after you take control of it to make it to deal more damage. It's a bit complex to understand it. Psychic bolts. You shoot some bolts, they hit a certain number of enemies, which is also a bit tricky to, keep track of. And they, strip enemy defenses and like armor stripping and damage reduction. Speed decreasing as well. You got your chaos, which makes enemies shoot each other as if like they were hit with like a radiation proc. And it covers like an area that you have to keep track of. And then finally, the absorb, where you just have to be stationary, and enemies shoot you, and you just tank everything that's coming at you, and you're invulnerable while it goes on, but you have to stay still, and then you let it go, and you deplete all of that stored energy. It's complex. It's tricky to understand like how you're supposed to use these correctly. So she is a bit clunky for a new player to get a hang of. 2 out of 5. In terms of utility, again, I'm gonna rank her pretty low. Her ability kit, as it were, is pretty good for her. For keeping herself alive, for dealing damage to enemies, for just manipulating the map to her advantage. But she's not really providing a whole lot of support for the rest of the team. Not really helping them out all that much in different mission types. Sorry, boys, but Nyx is not that much of a team player, unfortunately. 2 out of 5. Raw power. This is where things are looking up a bit. I'm going to put her at 4 out of 5. Nyx is pretty powerful, and she has found a home in the Steel Path against like very, very high-level enemies. The fact that she can do 100% armor stripping is very strong against very high level enemies that have these stupid sort of like damage reduction numbers, and she can just get rid of all of that. That is very, very potent. And the fact that she can also sort of keep herself alive through various crowd controlling means, making enemies shoot each other instead of her, means that like she can do some stuff. Cannot underestimate a Warframe that has such an easy time just completely removing enemy defenses. Just one button click and enemies go down to basically anything. That is strong. That is very strong. So I'm going to put her at 4 out of 5 in terms of raw power. terms of fun to play, middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. She does have some stuff going for her. She does have some cool abilities. Mind control is cool. Chaos is cool. It's not spectacular, but it's not boring either. She's got some interesting stuff with her gameplay. 3 out of 5. Oh, hey, it's Banshee, the sound Warframe. Yeah. Easy to obtain. 5 out of 5. You just get her from dojo research. Go to your clan dojo. Go to the Tenno lab. Purchase her blueprint. Purchase her parts. It's so easy. Just 5 out of 5. Anyone can get a Banshee whenever they want to. Beginner friendly. 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5. She is not that hard to get a hang of. Some of her abilities need some augments to really shine, so you can understand what they're supposed to do. Sonic Boom, it's a Fusroda, you push enemies away. If you augment it, you can strip their armor with it. Sonar. Use it to find weak points on enemies, so that when you shoot them in their weak points, they take more damage. It's a bit complex, but it's very strong. But you know, needs some getting the hang of. Take some time before you understand that if you use it multiple times, you can reveal multiple weak points. Hey. Silence just dampens all the sounds around you. It might not be entirely apparent for a new player how this ability works. The fact that enemies only get stunned momentarily, and then you have to get away from them and then get back for them to be stunned again. And it doesn't make your weapon go from alarming to silent, so it's a bit tricky to understand how it works. Once you do understand how it works, it's also very strong. It also sort of hinders enemies from using their abilities. So it works the same way as silence would do in a Final Fantasy game. So it doesn't really explain itself all that much. And Soundquake, it's an ability that makes you be stationary, but you just shake the ground and hit everything around you and sort of deplete enemy health over time. And it doesn't mesh all that well with the rest of her kit, so it's kind of hard to understand how you're supposed to use all of these things together. But all in all, not the most complex Warframe either. 3 out of 5. Utility, 3 out of 5, I'm gonna say. The Soundquake isn't all that useful for things outside of maybe interception missions, where it can be pretty good, I guess. Other than that, you don't really use that all that much. The sonar is strong, revealing the weak points. The silence is strong in a utility setting for just making it so that enemies can't use their abilities, basically. So she does provide some support to the group. She's not bad in that regard, so I'm going to put her at 3 out of 5. Raw power. 5 out of 5. Banshee is a monster. The whole thing with sonar, revealing weak points on enemies. You see that damage multiplier? Without any mods, without modding her for power strength in any way. It's 5 times. You do 5 times more damage if you hit an enemy in a weak spot. So, if you just bump that up with power strength, the damage multiplier is absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Banshee is one of the best damage dealers in the entire game with this ability. Do not sleep on it. It's so strong. Goddamn, Banshee hits like a truck. Power 5 out of 5. And finally, in terms of being fun to play, I'm gonna say above average. 4 out of 5. She's got 2 different distinct playstyles. Either you play using her number 1, number 2, and number 3 abilities together to have a mobile playstyle of doing damage and, crowd controlling enemies. Or you use her number 4 ability to just lock down an entire map, for example, for interception missions. And in particular, the first one, the first gameplay style with the sonar and the silence, it's strong, it's efficient, it's mobile, you feel very powerful, you feel very in control of every situation you're in. She is, unfortunately, a bit brittle. She's not very tanky, and she doesn't have any defensive abilities, per se, besides Silence for like some crowd control. Sonic Boom for crowd control. Soundquake for crowd control. But just if she gets hit, she goes down pretty quickly. The goal is to not get hit. So she requires a pretty active playstyle. I am of the opinion that active playstyles are fun. So yeah, she's pretty fun to play. 4 out of 5. Saryn. Oh, she's a beast, isn't she? Alright. In terms of easy to obtain, she's pretty low on the list, people. I'm gonna put her at a 2. You get her from farming the boss at Sedna, which is the second to last planet in the star chart. So that's pretty late. Same as with Trinity, you first have to play other nodes on Sedna to collect a certain amount of judgment points that you need in order to access the boss fight. And then the boss fight itself is a bit obtuse. It's one of the buggiest boss fights in the game, unfortunately. Not that hard, but frustrating is maybe the right word. So it takes a while to farm for her. She's not the easiest Warframe to get her hands on. To get your hands on. 2 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Yeah, I'm gonna say she is. Like there is some finesse to her and understanding how to use her correctly. But even if you don't know how to use her correctly, she's still a powerhouse. That's how strong she is. She has her spores that you detach onto an enemy. And then if you shoot the spore, then you spread the spores to people who are around that enemy, and they increase in damage over time. So after a while, just coating spores on every enemy on the map, and they just die by themselves. They just die. It's crazy. You have the Toxic Lash, which means you do additional toxin damage on all your attacks. And also, if you have Toxic Lash on, if that ability is active, if you shoot an enemy who has a spore on them, it's gonna automatically spread the spore. It doesn't matter where you hit them. You don't have to pop the spore. It's just gonna spread anyway. So these two together means you can spread spores to an entire map with ease. You got your Miasma, which is just a big explosion that hits all enemies in range with viral damage. And if they already have spores on them, they take much more damage, so it just works together with the 1 and 2. And then she also has a defense ability, Molt. Yeah, she sheds her skin. It creates a decoy. The decoy draws fire. You can augment this so that you heal yourself when you use this. After you use it, you run faster. It explodes after a while and deals damage to enemies. Like, this ability does so many things. It's such a nice little defense ability, and just gives her even more utility than she already had, and just makes her like even stronger, even though she didn't even need it. So yeah, it's easy. It's easy to kill things with Saryn. It's easy to survive with Saryn. It's easy to do basically anything with Saryn. Utility. Hey, 5 out of 5. Goddamn. She's great in exterminate missions because she kills everything. She's great in defense missions because she kills everything. She kills enemies that are standing in other rooms before they can even get to the defense objective. She is so good at crowd controlling, at killing, at just you know, making everyone's life so much easier no matter what. Yeah, Saryn. Did I mention she's also good in Sanctuary Onslaught? She is good for lots and lots of things. 5 out of 5. Great support for the squad as well as for yourself. Raw power. 5 out of 5. Holy shit. The spores just wiping entire maps. And the damage just keeps on ticking up forever. It doesn't matter how much stronger the enemies are. They're just gonna take more spore damage over time. It doesn't stop. She can kill anything. She's so strong. Oh my god. 5 out of 5. Power. Fun to play. Hey, 5 out of 5. Holy shit. She's enjoyable to play. It's you shoot out a spore on an enemy, you spread it. It's fun watching them die. You hit them with the miasma, they die. It's fun. You are in control of every situation. You are a god of viral death. It's, yeah. I mean, what do you want me to say? There's a reason why Saryn is probably the most popular Warframe in the entire game. She's just so good at everything. Yeah, no, she's great. The only drawback she has is that she's kind of hard to farm for. That's basically it. She's good at everything else. I don't know what to tell you, people. She's a beast. We have Vauban, the engineer Warframe. He's gone through like some reworks, so he's in a pretty good spot today. Easy to obtain? Yeah, pretty easy. He used to be hard to obtain, but now they've just put his component parts as stuff you get from the Nightwave store. And getting enough Nightwave creds to craft a Vauban is not particularly hard. Doesn't take all that long. So yeah, 4 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Not really. I'm gonna put him at 2 out of 5 here. He's got the Tesla Nervos, which throws out the little electric balls that latch onto enemies and zaps them and, you know, deal some crowd control. With an augment, they can also deal additional damage to other enemies when they die. It's a bit tricky. Mine Layer, it's one of those abilities that you have to cycle and rotate between different mines that do different things. They can latch on to enemies, or they can just shoot out like little sparks of damage. And they can make you move faster with a vector pad and boost weapon damage. Like, these are a bit complex, and honestly, like, only one of them, the Flechette Orb, is probably the only one that's actually sort of worth using. So it's a lot of, like, just, you know, added steps for something that's hard to, like, really make use of anyway. Photon Strike looks neat. You deploy a beacon and you zap with Artillery Strike, but it's not that useful, honestly. It's cool, but it's not that useful. Bastille is great. It's number 4 ability. You capture enemies in, suspend them in a field. You suck them together in a vortex. This, together with the Flechette Orb, means he can do some pretty fun stuff. It also debuffs them. It just, you know, drains armor over time, but it's tricky. It's tricky. It's good, but it's tricky. Utility, 4 out of 5. Yes, this guy is a utility player. Very good crowd control abilities. Very good at locking down entire areas and just shutting down enemies so they can't really do anything. Very helpful in a squad. If you see a Vauban in your team, you're gonna have a pretty goddamn easy time in that mission. Yeah, he's good for himself, and he also just helps everyone else with whatever they're doing as well. Definitely a utility player. 4 out of 5. Raw power, middle of the pack, I'd say. 3 out of 5. He can do some pretty good stuff, right, with the Bastille. Being able to strip armor is nice. Being able to lock down enemies and group them together is nice. But in terms of, like, actually dealing damage, he's still relegated to his weapons and stuff. So you can see a Vauban player usually, like, yeah, they lock down enemies and they trap them and they stick them all together and no one can do anything. But he's usually not the one who's killing the enemies. That's for his teammates to do. So he's not that strong by himself. He's good, but not a powerhouse. 3 out of 5. Fun to play? Yeah, pretty. Yeah, I'm gonna say above average. 4 out of 5. He's got a lot of different things going for him. He does have different abilities he can rotate between that do different things depending on what you need, even if only one of them's actually really useful. Bastille is enjoyable. Same here. Depending on whether you tap to cast or hold to cast, it does different things. So, more utility and more different ways to use abilities. Tesla Nervos, same thing here. Works differently whether you tap to cast or hold to cast because you charge it and stuff like that. So he's got a lot going on. And it takes some active playing to use him correctly. And that's always fun. So yeah, 4 out of 5. Nova, the molecular Warframe, the matter antimatter Warframe, who knows? let's say just the chemical reaction Warframe. What do I know? Yeah, she's cool. Easy to obtain? Hell yeah, she is. 5 out of 5. You just gotta get to Europa, and you just gotta fight the Raptor a couple of times to get her component parts. She is not at all hard to farm for. Very easy to get. 5 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Yeah, I'd say so. Middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. Because she has a couple of different abilities that all do pretty different things, and they sort of like just create a complete package. You have Null Star, which is her damage reduction ability. She surrounds herself with these stars that give her damage reduction while they're around her, and you kind of have to recast it pretty often because they shoot off and hit enemies. You have Antimatter Drop. You shoot like a grenade that does some damage and detonates and launches enemies away. A bit of damage dealing, but not a whole lot. You got Wormhole, which creates a portal that you jump through, and then you end up on the other side of the portal. You can shoot through the wormhole and hit stuff at the other side. So, you know, she's got a mobility skill, and it lets you have fun with portals. Hey. And then she has her ultimate ability, the Molecular Prime, which just, you know, slows down time for everything around it. Every enemy that's close to you is going to move at a snail's pace. It just slows down the world. And also primes enemies, which means that they take more damage and they explode when they die. So it's a pretty interesting and fun set of abilities. And they all sort of are pretty self-explanatory in what they do. Utility, 5 out of 5. Nova is the... Wow. I mean, she's up there together with Trinity for the best support players in the game. And that is specifically because of Molecular Prime. Any sort of defensive mission or any sort of stationary mission where you just have to stay in one spot and the enemies have to come to you. This ability is super potent and super powerful. Just shutting down enemies like this and just making them grind to a complete halt is very strong. Very good for a team. And you can also build her the other way around. If you give her mods that give her negative ability strength, she actually makes enemies move faster than they otherwise would. Which is nice if you have like a team of so-called nuke frames that can wipe out huge masses of trash mobs in a very short time. So if you go through, for example, a defense mission, you can make every wave go faster by making enemies run toward the defense objective much faster so that they can die much faster and you can get to the next wave. She is such a utility player and so good at what she does with the Molecular Prime that alone makes her a 5 out of 5 utility Warframe. Raw power, middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. Molecular Prime does make enemies take more damage, and it does make them explode when they die, so it packs a bit of a punch, but it's not super strong. It's not super strong. It's not the kind of damage that some other Warframes can deal. She does not have a really good way of like reducing enemy defenses and stripping armor, stuff like that. And the Null Star ability is a good defensive tool, but it only works on her health. It doesn't work on her shields. So when you get up to really, really high levels, it stops being all that useful as a defensive ability. So there is a hard limit to how far you can take a Nova. So for that reason, 3 out of 5 in terms of just power. Fun to play, above average, 4 out of 5. And that is because, hey, being able to just manipulate enemies this way and just slowing them down, yeah, that's fun. It feels good. Wormhole, it's a fun ability. It's tricky to get your hang of. It's a bit janky, but it's fun. So she's got some stuff that just really sets her apart from everyone else and makes her feel unique, which we like. So yeah, Nova's cool. Fun to play, 4 out of 5. Next up, we have Nekros, the Necromancer Warframe. How hard is he to get? he used to be harder to get, because you used to farm for him in the Orokin Derelict, and that didn't have any public matchmaking, so you were mostly forced to play solo in these missions. And the boss fight against Lephantis can be hard for a new player to do solo. So it used to be a bit of a struggle. And the Lephantis and the Orokin Derelict came at a bit later point in the game. Now the Derelict no longer exists. They moved all of those nodes to Deimos, and they now have public matchmaking. So now you don't have to play solo anymore to farm for him, which makes him a whole lot easier to farm for, and you can get him a whole lot earlier. So now I'm going to put him at 4 out of 5. It would be 5 out of 5 if it wasn't for the fact that Lephantis is still a bit of a slog, that boss fight. But he's pretty easy to get now. 4 out of 5. Beginner friendly? No, I'm not. I don't think he is very beginner friendly. 2 out of 5, because he needs a lot. He needs mods. He needs to be built for certain things. It's hard to make him good at everything at the same time. He's recently had his Soul Punch reworked to be better, so that, you know, it has some use. Okay, sure. Terrify. You cast to spook enemies, make them run away. It also strips some of their armor. You can augment it to also make them move slower. But most of the time in Warframe you don't want enemies to run away from you because you want to kill them. And having them run away from you makes it harder to kill them. So it's hard to find like a good spot to use this ability. Desecrate, this is bread and butter because, you know, he makes enemies drop more loot. Okay, I guess. That's what it does. And then he can, you know, summon dead enemies to fight for you. Okay, sure. But it's like, it's hard to sort of like get an overview of how all of these things are supposed to mesh and click together to provide like just, you know, a gameplay, a style of playing. So he's not that beginner friendly. In terms of utility, above average, 4 out of 5. And the reason for that is because Desecrate. Everyone loves Desecrate. That's why you see people play Nekros. He is meant for resource farming. He straight up makes enemies drop more loot. You can pluck loot from corpses 2 times instead of 1. You can increase that by using weapons that deal primarily slash damage to cut enemies into pieces, which means that you get 2 corpses that you can use Desecrate on, and you get even more loot that way. Yeah, that's why people play Nekros, because, you know, he's the loot frame, and everyone loves having a Nekros on the team, because that means you just get more loot. Yeah, 4 out of 5. In terms of raw power, below average. 2 out of 5. He does have some stuff he can do. Soul Punch can instantly kill enemies if they are at a certain like health threshold when you cast it. You can build, not for Desecrate, but instead build for Shadows of the Dead and summon spooks that are actually somewhat powerful, but he is not meant for like big damage and pushing very, very high. It's not really what he's for. There's a limit to what he can do. He doesn't have that much damage potential. 2 out of 5. Fun to play. I'm putting him low. 2 out of 5. And the reason for that is because, I mean, he's there to loot. He's there to just have a passive ability on that makes enemies drop more loot. And Shadows of the Dead, you don't control the shadows. You just summon them and then they run around and shoot by themselves. You as Nekros don't do all that much. You're not using Terrify all that much. So the only thing that you're sort of going to be actually casting at a regular rate might be Soul Punch, which is not the most exciting ability in the game either. I don't think Nekros is particularly fun to play. He's good. He's useful. There's a reason why people play him. But he's not that fun to play, unfortunately. Valkyr, everyone's favorite kitty cat, right? Yeah. How easy is she to get? She is very easy to get. You get her from farming the boss fight on Jupiter, Alad V. and his Zanuka. Is that a hard boss fight? No, that's not a hard boss fight. It's a very easy boss fight. So, you know, it's not that hard to get her. You can get a Valkyr today if you wanted to. It's easy. Just go and just go and get a Valkyr. Just go get her. Beginner friendly? Not exactly. 2 out of 5. She's a bit tricky to get the hang of. Some, like, I don't know. Rip line, you shoot a hook at an enemy and pull them in. I guess. And you can use it as a sort of mobility skill if you hit the terrain. But using it as a mobility skill is a bit tricky. And it's not that much better than just bullet jumping and parkouring the normal way. So it's a bit obsolete. Maybe that was good once upon a time. Warcry. Yeah, that's pretty easy to understand and self-explanatory. You just cast it, and then you and everyone around you, you get more armor and more attack speed. And enemies become slower. Okay, that sounds good. That's a good ability. Paralysis. That's also like tricky why you want to use that. Because you drain your own shields and you deplete your own shields to hurt enemies around you. That sounds a bit scary. Hysteria is a cool ability on paper where you turn yourself invulnerable and you pull out your exalted weapon, your claws, and you do a ton of damage. But this is also sort of wonky because, like, you're not exactly invulnerable. Enemies still shoot you and that damage is just stored. And if, when Hysteria ends, you still have enemies close to you, around you, then you'll take that damage, that sword damage, and you're gonna die. But if you're clear, if there are no enemies around you when Hysteria ends, then you won't take that damage. So it's like conditional invulnerability. It's sort of hard for a new player to understand and to play her correctly and to avoid like dying just from, you know, I don't know, just being unreliable. So not that beginner friendly. Utility, I'm putting her at the middle of the pack, 3 out of 5, and that is because of Warcry. She has one utility power that's pretty goddamn good. You buff your entire team, more armor, more attack speed, yeah, I like that. And Warcry is the reason why people play Valkyr. Just that's her one really, really good ability. And unfortunately, now that they put Warcry in the helmet system so that anyone can have access to Warcry, that sort of means that there's no real reason to play Valkyr anymore, unfortunately. Raw power, middle of the pack, 3 out of 5, nothing spectacular. Her claws are good, but Hysteria is unreliable. Warcry is good, but that's pretty much her only good ability. Paralysis is considered kind of a bad ability. Ripline is considered kind of a bad ability. Hysteria is considered kind of an unreliable ability. So basically, Valkyr only has one really good ability. And that means she's not going to be that powerful. 3 out of 5. And finally, as for being fun to play, you know, with what I just said... Yes, Ordis.
I may require maintenance after all.
You do. With what I just said, you know, about her abilities, I'm going to put a low. It's going to be 2 out of 5, because the one good ability that you have is a sort of like passive thing. You just activate it, and then it just runs for its entire duration, and it's just something it's in the background. Ripline and Paralysis, you don't really like using them all that much. And Hysteria, you might go for that and like the claws, and that's fun, running around and slashing things with the claws, which is like, Hysteria is the reason why I put her at 2 and not 1. Because if all you do is just activate this and have it on in the background, and otherwise she's got nothing special ability-wise, then that would be like a 1 out of 5. But she's got Hysteria, so we're putting it up to 2, but unfortunately, not that fun to play, sadly. Oberon. Is he easy to get? I think so. Because you farm for Oberon by killing Eximus units. Every Eximus unit has a chance to drop an Oberon part. pretty low chance, but, you know, you're just gonna kill Xmas units over time. The longer you stay in a mission, the more Xmas units are gonna spawn in, so if you can, like, play a defense mission or a survival mission for a long time, it's easier to farm for him. But the point is, it doesn't require any active effort from your part. If you just play the game and keep on playing the game for long enough, you're just gonna have all of his component parts. They're just gonna plop up in your inventory by themselves over time as you kill Xmas units. You can passively farm for him while you're just doing other things in the game. So 4 out of 5, pretty easy to get your hands on an Oberon. Beginner friendly, I'm gonna say he's not that beginner friendly. He requires some build around. He requires some endgame stuff to really, like, sort of, you know, become useful. In his base form, it's a bit tricky to make him work. He's got his smite. You can hit enemies with that, and it spreads around, and just, you know, if there are many targets, each target is going to get hit by one of these little shots. If there's just one target, that target's going to be hit by all of the orbs. And it deals a percentage of enemy health as damage. So if you're facing one single enemy that's very tough, you can hit them with this, and they're gonna go down pretty quickly. But it's a bit wonky and a bit limited in how you can use it. Hallowed ground, you put grass on the ground, and enemies who stand on the ground, they take damage, and you can combine this with some of his other abilities and do some cool stuff with it. But it's a bit, you know, obtuse. Renewal, yeah, you can heal yourself. You have an aura that makes you heal yourself and your allies over time, but it drains your energy. So you kind of need to build around that. You kind of need to have mods that help you regain energy. Otherwise, you know, it's gonna go. You know, you're gonna drain it pretty quickly and just gonna run out of energy, and then it's not gonna be a reliable way of healing, unfortunately. And he has his Reckoning, where you can slam enemies onto the ground, and if you slam enemies onto the ground while they are standing on the hallowed ground, on the grass, then you also strip their armor. But, you know, it's a bit tricky to make that work, and it's very costly. It's very energy costly. So again, without building toward that and having all of that endgame stuff, it's very hard to, like, have the energy reserves necessary to just actually use him in an efficient way. So he's gonna feel limited in the beginning. Not very beginner friendly, 2 out of 5. Utility, yes, Oberon has a lot of utility, because he does have all of these things that can help a group out. He can hit single targets for stupid amounts of damage. He can make all enemies get debuffed and take more damage. He can heal party members. He can strip enemy defenses and generate health orbs. He can do a lot of stuff that's very helpful for a team. So if you can build around him, if you can do the things that you want him to do, hell yeah. Definitely like having an Oberon on the team. Does Oberon have raw power? Yeah, he has a decent amount of power, actually. So we're going to put him at 3 out of 5. The reason for that is because, like I said, for example, with Frost, any Warframe that has an ability that lets you strip armor and just take away enemy damage reduction will put you on a bit of a pedestal and set you apart from other Warframes. He has that. Even if it's a bit clunky to use and costly, he does have it. Smite can be a very potent tool for single target damage, since it deals a percentage of enemy health, meaning that you can, if you shoot it at a single target, it's going to do an absolutely absurd amount of damage. It just doesn't work against multiple targets. So it's a bit conditional. Healing is good, it's potent, until you reach a certain level. A certain level when you get up there to the 100s and 200s and 300s in enemy levels, where it's not going to heal you fast enough. So, you know, again, it's good, but it has its limits. So that's basically everything about Oberon. It's like, yeah, it's good, but it has its limits. And, you know, he has some areas of the game where he kind of excels. He is like one of the Warframes who can solo Eidolon hunts, for example. He just has a very good skill set for doing that. So he definitely has some juice in the tank, just not applicable to every single scenario. So we're going to put him in the middle. 3 out of 5. Decently powerful. And fun to play? Yeah. Like, again, it all comes down to if you can make him work. If you can have the sort of stuff needed to push him to those levels. He can do a bunch of different things. He doesn't feel sort of locked into just being able to do one thing. And he's got a pretty interesting kit. So yeah, I like playing Oberon. He's fun. 4 out of 5. Fun to play. Zephyr is in a weird spot right now. He is a bit of a punching bag among some members of the community who think he's kind of garbage and think he sucks and needs to be reworked and stuff. He probably does need to be reworked and tweaked a little bit more, but he's in an interesting spot and he's not all that bad, actually. First of all, is he easy to obtain? Yes, he is. He's very easy to obtain. Because you get him from your clan dojo research. Go to your clan, go to your dojo, go to your Tenno lab, purchase his blueprints. That's how you get Zephyr. Very easy. Easy to obtain, 5 out of 5. Is he beginner friendly? No, he is not. 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5. Because a lot of his abilities are kind of tricky to get the hang of how they work. Tailwind that you can use to sort of fly, which is a bit different from bullet jumping, but, you know, with bullet jumping and especially with like arc wings in open worlds, it's kind of hard to see what the use for this ability is without having its augments, which a new player won't have access to. Airburst. It's been tweaked a bit. It's a bit better than it used to be. You can tap to vacuum enemies in and suck them together. It's a way of grouping enemies. You can hold to just knock them back instead and shoot them in different direction. And you can shoot it into your tornadoes to make your tornadoes bigger. But it's a bit complex. It's a bit complex understanding how to use this ability as well. Turbulence, that's a bit easier to get the hang of. It's an extremely good defensive ability. Just redirects any and all incoming projectiles. But it doesn't work against area of effect attacks. It doesn't work against like status procs. It doesn't work against melee attacks. So again, it's like you can't just activate it and then just think you're immortal. You still have to sort of play actively and understand how to use it. So it's a bit tricky. Again, not super easy for a new player to understand. The tornadoes are also complicated, where you can either hold to cast moving tornadoes or tap to cast stationary tornadoes. You can manipulate the size of the tornadoes with your airburst, and you shoot into the tornadoes with different elements, and then the tornadoes will have that element. It's very complicated. He's a complex Warframe. I'm not gonna lie. So no, he's not beginner friendly. Oh, she. It's a she. I always forget. She's not beginner friendly. 2 out of 5. Utility, again, below average, 2 out of 5. The tornadoes are good for crowd control, I guess, and for damage, but they're also erratic. And same with airburst, either grouping enemies or separating them. Hard for a squad mate to understand what you're doing. And it's just, Zephyr doesn't really help a team all that much, unfortunately. You're just doing stuff basically for yourself. And I don't know, below average, 2 out of 5. Raw power, he's not in a super bad spot here. I'm going to put him at 3 out of 5 because he has some stuff that he can do. The tornadoes, if you know how to use them correctly, actually are, you know, quite useful. They are a good crowd control method. They do some decent damage. And Tailwind, if you have its augment, actually has infinitely scaling damage. So you can, you know, take your damage to infinite levels if you play it correctly, but it's a bit janky. But it's not easy. It's not easy to make him work. He's complex, and she's complex, and the way of building damage is a bit slow. So it's not bad, but not great either. So 3 out of 5. In terms of fun to play, this I'm gonna say is where Zephyr excels, because she has such a unique playstyle with just flying. 5 out of 5. Even though she has some issues with her kit and just her abilities and her overall power levels and her utility levels, she is very fun. She feels unique and she feels cool, and when you can get her stuff to work, she has a very different feel to her than most other Warframes. So yeah, Zephyr, actually a whole lot of fun to play. 5 out of 5. Hydroid. And you know, pretty much everyone got a Hydroid Prime for this past year's TennoCon. So, you know, a lot of people have a Hydroid already. But if you don't have a Hydroid, in terms of being able to farm for him, 3 out of 5, honestly. Because yes, you can get him pretty early. You farm for him on Earth. But you do so in the Vahek boss fight. And the Vahek boss fight is actually not that easy for a new player. It's a bit of a struggle. So unfortunately, he's not super easy to farm for. Not super hard, but not super easy either. 3 out of 5. Beginner friendly? No. He is not beginner friendly. He is a bit clunky. He is a bit hard to get a hang of how you're supposed to play with him. Your Tempest Barrage, where you drop down just, you know, water splashes from the air, doesn't feel all that useful. Tidal Surge, it's a mobility skill and you drag enemies along with you. Yeah, you know, it's good, but it costs a lot of energy and you have to build around it. Hard to move over terrain with this though. It just stops, unfortunately. Undertow, which is an interesting ability where you drop down below and you're in the ocean and you suck enemies in. It's cool, but at the same time you're almost like down to a standstill. You move at a snail's pace and you have to use Tidal Surge to move around. And it's limited how you can move around with the Tidal Surge. So it's clunky. And the Tentacle Swarm, you know, where you grab enemies with tentacles. And this is what people primarily use him for because you can get more loot if you have an augment for this. But other than that, it's like, there's a lot of controlling abilities, but it's hard to like sort of see how all of this meshes and gels. So he's not very beginner friendly. Utility, above average, 4 out of 5, and the reason for that is because Tentacle Swarm has an augment called Pilfering Swarm, which means that enemies that die while they're being held by the tentacles, they drop more loot. This works together with Hydroid, so they stack. So more loot from this and then more loot again from Desecrating. So a Hydroid and a Nekros working together means you get a whole lot more loot, just getting resources faster. Unfortunately, Khora can do the same thing, and Khora is better in every way. So the new meta is Nekros and Khora rather than Nekros and Hydroid. But Hydroid can do it. Hydroid can do it. So, you know, he has a clear utility purpose. Raw power, middle of the pack. Middle of the pack. And the reason why he's not higher or lower is, you know, because he has a crazy damage ability, which is the Undertow. You pull enemies down and they take damage every second that they're down here in the deep with you, and the longer they're down there, the more damage they take per second until they die. So this works against all enemies, all levels. No matter how high you reach in level, it's gonna work. So that's one of the strongest damage dealing abilities in the entire game. The problem is that you have to be down there and you can't move, and you have to be pretty much entirely stationary, and it's hard to get people to get sucked into the water with you. So it's hard to use, hard to hit enemies with it, and you have to stay still. But if you can pull down enemies, you'll kill basically anything with this. This is middle of the pack in terms of raw power. Very strong, but very clunky and hard to use. Which leads into the final one, fun to play, and this is unfortunately where Hydroid ranks among the lowest in the entire game, 1 out of 5. He has a playstyle. For it to work, you have to remain stationary. You have to stay still in one spot and just slowly grind out enemies. Either pull them down into the undertow, and just wait for them to die, or grab them with your tentacles, and then just, wait for them to get to you, and get latched onto the tentacles, and then you can kill them. You just stay still in one spot. So unfortunately, playing Hydroid is really boring. There's no other way of saying it. He's not fun to play. That's his biggest drawback. He's just not fun to play. Mirage, my baby, my gal, my top lady. Damn, she's cool. Is she hard to get? Middle of the pack. Like, you get her from a quest. That you're gonna just, if you play main quest long enough, you just get the quest where you get Mirage. So you're gonna get her automatically by doing that. But it's a quest that comes fairly late in the main storyline. So, not super hard, not super easy either. 3 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Not entirely, because she requires a lot of build around. She has her Hall of Mirrors that creates copies, and they shoot and they also do some damage, but it requires build around to work correctly. She has her Sleight of Hand, where she drops down these traps on the ground, but it requires an augment to really be efficient, so it's also build around. You have Eclipse, which sometimes deals damage, or sometimes makes you deal more damage, and sometimes gives you damage reduction based on if you're standing in light or if you're standing in darkness. But it's hard to make that work predictably, and the buff you get is determined by how much light you're standing in, so it's very unpredictable, very clunky, and very sort of unreliable. And then you have your Prism, which is you just throw a ball and you hit enemies with the ball and they die. And that's pretty straightforward. But her other abilities are not that straightforward. So she's unfortunately not that beginner friendly, which is a bit sad because, man, she's so good. Utility. Hey, guess what, people? 5 out of 5. Yes. Yes, 5 out of 5. The reason for that is because you can build her for different things. She can be a massive, massive damage dealer, both offensively and defensively, depending on how you build her. A classic offensive Mirage is built around the damage you get from her Hall of Mirrors and her copies, and augmenting for even more damage, and sometimes getting even more damage from Eclipse. And she shreds enemies on the highest levels. If you want to go defense, you build for Sleight of Hand instead, and plopping down these grenades that just destroy everything. And with the augment, this becomes even more potent and lets her just shut down an entire map where enemies just die if they just get close to her. So she can carry most missions by herself, depending on how you build her. Hell yeah, she's a utility player, absolutely. Raw power, 5 out of 5. Yes. Yes. Mirage, she is so goddamn powerful. With her Hall of Mirrors, you have no idea how strong this ability is if you build correctly for it. In terms of just not killing enemies with abilities per se, but instead killing them with your guns, with your weapons. That's what she can do. And she has so many things that just improve on her weapon damage. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, the power is absolutely there. She is strong. She's really, really strong. 5 out of 5. Fun to play, above average, very high, 4 out of 5. The reason for that is simply because, she can do a whole lot of different things, and they all look cool and they all feel cool. You want visual effects and lightning sparks and lights and copies of yourself and just a kaleidoscope of effects all over your screen. That's what you're gonna get with Mirage, and you're also gonna kill things very efficiently while you do it. I would put her at 5 out of 5 if it wasn't for the fact that she unfortunately is somewhat frail, because Eclipse is not a reliable defensive ability. Sometimes it's just not going to give you any damage reduction at all when you need it. If you have the helmet system, you can make her very tanky, but without it, you cannot. So she requires a lot of finesse, and she requires you to play smart to survive. But if you can, she's a beast. And she's fun to play. Yeah, 4 out of 5. Limbo, probably the most unique Warframe in the entire game. Probably the most misunderstood and the most misplayed as well. How hard is he to get? 3 out of 5, because you get him from playing a mission. You're just gonna get him by yourself, just by playing this mission. And it's in the middle part of the game, something like that. So, 3 out of 5. Not hard, not easy. Just, you know, play the mission, get the Limbo. Beginner friendly? No. 1 out of 5. Like I said, he's probably the most misplayed Warframe in the game, and so many people don't know how to play him correctly, and he can be so frustrating for yourself and primarily for your teammates. If you play with someone who is playing Limbo and they don't know how to play Limbo, you're gonna have a bad time, unfortunately. He works by utilizing a different plane of existence called the Rift Plane that he can dodge in and out of, and he can banish enemies into the Rift Plane, he can shoot them back out into reality, and things that are in one plane cannot interact with things that are in another plane. It's very tricky to get your hang around this and how it works. So if you banish enemies into the Rift, your teammates can't kill them. And that's not gonna make them happy with you for doing that. So you got your ability for banishing enemies and for pulling them back out. You got your stasis that makes enemies who are banished frozen in time and staying still. You got Rift Surge, which is very hard to even understand what it does just from reading the ability description. You basically need the augment for it to actually make use of it. And you got Cataclysm, which just creates a huge field where just everything inside of the field is inside of the Rift Plane. So you can't, if you're standing inside of it, you can't hurt enemies that are outside of it, and vice versa, stuff like that. Yeah, no, it's complicated. He's tricky. It's not easy for a new player to understand how you're supposed to play Limbo. But when it comes to utility, 4 out of 5. Close to 5 out of 5. Because if you do know how to play Limbo, and if you understand how to use him, yes, he is a key player. Being able to manipulate it so that you can defend objectives. Enemies outside, they can't get to it. They can't even get close to it because they're frozen as soon as they enter the Cataclysm. Having a defense target, an operative you have to defend, you banish the defense target into the Rift. Enemies can't hurt it. You can do so many cool things with Limbo. And whenever there's a new update that requires like just some sort of finesse and weird wonky playstyles, like Limbo always shows up, and Limbo always becomes part of the meta because he can do so many things that no one else can do. Absolutely key utility player. Close to 5 out of 5. I'm putting him at 4 out of 5 because it can be a hindrance for Warframes who primarily kill people with their weapons because they can't shoot through the Rift Planes. Warframe abilities can, but weapons can't. Another thing that makes him hard to understand. Raw power, above average, 4 out of 5. Again, because the Rift Plane is so strong. If you augment him correctly, you can actually do a whole lot of damage to people who are in the Rift. And you can basically stay alive. You can manipulate things so that you can decide when you can be hurt by enemies and when you can't be hurt by enemies. Yeah, no, if you are a master of the Rift and the master of playing Limbo, there's just not a whole lot of things you can't do. And finally, fun to play. 4 out of 5, maybe even 5 out of 5, just because he's so unique and so different from every other Warframe in the game, with how he bounces in and out of the rift. Screw that, 5 out of 5. He is super fun to play, and there are just some things that he is always going to be better than everyone else at doing. Yeah, no, he's the most unique Warframe in the game. 5 out of 5. That's how fun he is to play. Next up, Mesa. Hard to get? Kinda. So unfortunately only 2 out of 5. In order to farm for Mesa, you have to do the Mutalist Ala-D boss fight. It happens on Eris, which is fairly late in the star chart. And you also have to farm for keys so that you can do the boss fight. They show up sometimes in invasion missions, so it can take a long time to farm enough keys to get every part. So farming a Mesa can actually take quite some time, unfortunately. 2 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Yes. Yes, she is. 4 out of 5. The reason for that is because 2 of her good abilities are sort of passive abilities. You just activate them and then they just give buffs, and they give defense, they give crowd control, they give damage reflection, stuff. You don't even have to think about it, just keep them active and they do their thing. One ability is kind of useless, so you never use it anyway. And her final ability is just her guns, and you shoot people with the guns. It's very straightforward, not that hard to get your hang around. not that hard to get your head around, or to get the hang of. We don't do hang-arounds here, people. So yeah, one ability that you just won't use because it sucks. 2 abilities that are passive, and 1 ability where you just shoot guns. Yeah, it's pretty easy to get your head around. Utility, again, 4 out of 5. Shooting gallery. It provides buffs to teammates, and it jams guns of enemies, which helps your teammates too. So that's good for everyone. And hey, peacemakers, hey, the best defense is a good offense, and she clears enemies so fast. She can just stay at a defense target and just shred anything in close proximity. She can move and just use this and shred anything. She's good in a lot of different mission types. Yes, utility player. Yeah, she actually is. 4 out of 5. Raw power. 5 out of 5. Yep. Mesa is one of the most popular so-called nuke frames in the game. That is because of the peacemakers. These guns, if you mod them correctly, they will blaze through any goddamn enemy in the game. And since it's like just an extremely high rate of fire, right? It makes it an AoE attack or area effect where you just hit every enemy. But it works just as well as single target damage, since you can just empty like 1,000 bullets into an enemy in a second. So she's good for everything damage wise. She just packs such a good punch. One of the best damage dealers in the entire game. 5 out of 5. Fun to play. I'm putting her in the middle of the pack here. 3 out of 5. The reason for that is because, you know, she has one thing that she can do, and that's the peacemakers. That's her thing. She's got her passive buffs that you don't really think about, and then you just use the peacemakers. That's what you do. You shoot people with the peacemakers. She's very good at that. It's very strong. It's very useful. You feel powerful. You feel in control. But that's how you play Mesa. So, yeah, it's fun. It's not the most fun. Middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. Pretty fun. Which is pretty fun. We have Chroma. Is Chroma hard to get? Yes. Chroma is pretty hard to get. You do get the main blueprint from doing a quest. Unfortunately, building the different component parts requires different other Warframe parts. One part requires you to have a piece of Saryn. One part requires you to have a piece of Frost. One part requires you to have a piece of Volt. One part requires you to have a piece of Ember, and some of these are a bit clunky to get, in particular the Saryn part. So collecting all the different pieces of Chroma actually takes quite some time. He is somewhat of a hassle to farm for, so 2 out of 5. Beginner friendly? No, he's not really that beginner friendly either. Again, 2 out of 5. He has just been reworked a little bit, so his number 1 ability lets you flip through different elements that you cycle through, and that's going to affect what element all of his other abilities is going to have. And then you just like breathe fire at an enemy. It's okay, it's not great. Elemental Ward. You put an armor on yourself that lasts a certain number of seconds, and depending on what element you have, it does different things. It can redirect damage. It can give you more health. It can give you more shields. It can give you more armor. It can give you more holster speed. Yeah, it's a bit tricky to get your hang of. It's a good ability, but a bit tricky to get your hang of. Vex armor used to be better when self-damage was a thing in the game, because you activate it, and then you gotta make sure to keep it active, and you have to recast it before it runs out. And by taking damage, you become stronger. When your shields hit, you get more armor. When your health gets hit, that's after your enemies have bypassed your shields, you do more weapon damage. And as you can see, this can increase quite a lot, so that ultimately your weapons can do like 8 times the normal amount of damage, which makes Chroma really good for certain things. For example, he's very popular for the Prophet Taker boss fight, stuff like that, because of Vex armor. But now that you can't damage yourself anymore, it's harder to charge Vex armor up to get those numbers you want. It's a bit trickier, but if you can do it, Chroma can be quite the potent damage dealer, but it requires a lot of work and a lot of finesse. And finally, you have the effigy, where you can detach your pelt, as it were, and just give different sort of buffs. This is mainly only used for one thing, and that is to get more credits when you do Prophet Taker. So it's a bit of a complicated set of abilities, not super beginner friendly. 2 out of 5. Utility, yes, 4 out of 5. He does have utility. The Elemental Ward, it works not just on Chroma, but on nearby allies as well. You can even augment it to like heal. That's strong. The effigy buffs, they also work on nearby allies. And, you know, hey, if you're gonna run Prophet Taker and you got a Chroma in the team, and the Chroma makes it so that you get like more money, so you get like 2 million credits instead of 1 million credits. Yeah, that's pretty good, people. That's pretty good. Raw power? Yeah, 4 out of 5. Above average. He's not one of those people who can go for like infinite lengths of time or whatnot. But do not underestimate the buff that you can get from Vex armor when you can make it work the way it's supposed to. You can get those damage upgrades. Chroma can do big numbers, people. He can do really big numbers. It's just that other Warframes have an easier time getting there. So he's not 5 out of 5, but he is 4 out of 5. Fun to play, 3 out of 5, I'm gonna say. Middle of the pack. He's got a lot of different sort of weird things going, and but it's hard to like make it all work. It feels a bit limited, right? You have your elemental ward that protects you. You have your Vex armor, but these feel kind of passive. They're just things that are happening in the background. It doesn't feel like active ability use. Spectral Scream is, even with the changes to it, it's still kind of a bad ability, so you're not going to use that all that much, except for flipping through elements now. And Effigy, it can do some stuff for just, you know, defense missions when you're staying stationary. Otherwise, you just do it for Prophet Taker. So, I don't know. Most of it feels a bit passive. It's not bad. It's not super exciting either. Equinox! My main squeeze, as it were. How hard is she to acquire? She's decently hard to acquire, 2 out of 5. Granted, you only have to do a single boss fight for this, Tile Regger, the boss fight on Uranus. The problem here is that she has a night form and a day form, and you have to farm for all of this from Tile Regger together with the blueprints for them as well, which means that a normal Warframe has 3 different parts you have to farm for from a boss. Equinox has 8 different parts that you have to farm for from this boss fight. And once you have like 7 out of the 8 parts, right? Every time you do that boss fight, it only has a 1 in 8 chance to give you that final part you need. So you're gonna have to fight Tile Regger over and over and over and over again many times to get all the parts. So she's actually quite hard to farm for. 2 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Not one bit. 1 out of 5. She is one of the more complicated Warframes in the game. The reason for that is because she has 2 different forms. You use your number 1 ability to shift between night form and day form. And night form and day form have completely different abilities. They work completely different. The night form is for putting enemies to sleep and for healing. The day form is for making enemies take more damage and building up huge room clearing nukes. So, you know, that's hard to understand. And then when you switch between them, if you don't have some certain augments, you lose whatever sort of stuff you have built up. You have to start from 0 again. So, she's hard. She's hard to understand. Not at all sort of like self-explanatory for a new player. Tricky, 1 out of 5. Utility, 5 out of 5. Yes, the reason for that is because you can build her to do anything, right? You can build her for sleeping enemies combined with finishers if you want to farm for focus on like exterminate missions. You can also sleep to do animal conservation without even having a trank gun. You can heal to make it easier to do disruption missions. I mean, not disruption, defection missions, right? To heal the defection targets that you're trying to defend. You can switch to day form. You can buff your entire team with more ability strength. You can do huge nukes that kills everything around you. It also hits enemies with slash procs and stuns them. You can make enemies take more damage from your attacks. There's just nothing that Equinox can't do. She can do absolutely everything. The most versatile Warframe in the entire game. 5 out of 5 utility. Raw power, 4 out of 5. The reason for that is because of the MAME, the nuke that she has while in day form. She has to work for it. You build up your stored damage by killing enemies while this ability is active. So you have to have other means of killing enemies. You kill enemies with your weapons first to store up your nuke damage. And after that, you detonate your nuke to do all of that stored damage in a huge area around you. And then you start to have to build it up again. It's very powerful, but it's not unfair. It's powerful but fair. You have to work for it. It doesn't come automatically like it does for, bullshit cheating Warframes like Saryn. So, unfortunately, not a 5 out of 5 in power, but still way above average. 4 out of 5. Finally, fun to play, 5 out of 5. Equinox is a delight because it's not just one Warframe, it's 2 Warframes. You can build them differently. You can even have universal builds where you switch between them depending on what you want to do. So versatile, can be built so many different ways, can do everything. Super fun to play. And hey, she can also just nuke entire rooms of trash mobs, which is always fun. Yeah, she's so much fun. 5 out of 5. Atlas. How hard is he to get? Not that hard. 3 out of 5. Granted, you have to get to Eris. But once you're at Eris, unlike the Mesa boss fight, you don't need any specific key. For this one, you can just do the boss fight over and over again to farm him. The boss fight is not hard. It's just that the boss has a very big health bar, so if you don't have good Arcwing weapons that are modded correctly, it's gonna take forever. But it's not hard. So, not that hard to farm for. 3 out of 5. Beginner friendly? No, not that really. Because he has this sort of passive thing. Well, in the sense that like you build up rubble, which is like you can give yourself extra stone armor or rubble armor, and you have to like balance between different abilities to give yourself rubble armor, which can be a bit tricky. First you petrify enemies, and then you have your landslide punch, and if you punch petrified enemies, then that creates rubble that you can pick up, and it heals you. But if you pick up the rubble while you're at full health, you instead get extra armor. And then you can have augments that make it so that if you have a lot of rubble armor, then your punch becomes better and stops causing it. Like, it's complicated. It's tricky. So he's got a lot of different systems going around to sort of make him work. So no, not that beginner friendly. 2 out of 5. Utility, 3 out of 5. The reason for that is because he has some decent amount of like crowd control and helpful abilities. Even if they're not super great, they're still there. He has his rumblers. He can summon these 2 stone elementals. They draw fire. They punch enemies. And, you know, that helps. Makes it easier for everyone else. He has his tectonics, which are not that great, but he can build some stone walls. They can be used to block doors. They can be used to defend objectives. Stuff like that. So he can do some stuff besides just deal damage. He can do some other cool stuff as well. He's not the best in the game at it, but hey, it's not nothing. It's something. He can do some things. 3 out of 5. Raw power, not that bad. 4 out of 5. The reason for that is because of his landslide punch. It does a whole amount of damage when you can build it up. When you got your big rubble armor and you got your big augments for it. He is a big punch boy. That's what he is. He just, you know, punches enemies in the face with stone punch, and they die. And if you use it correctly, he hits pretty goddamn hard, people. He hits pretty goddamn hard. He can take out some pretty high level stuff with his punch. So yeah, Rock Punch Man. 4 out of 5. Fun to play. I'm gonna put him above average here. I'm gonna say 4 out of 5. I have said it before, I like active playstyles. I like stuff where you have to sort of pay attention to different meters and building up resources and working towards like just making some abilities work. He has his rubble system and you get the good payoff as well, where the rubble makes him tough and gives him more armor and makes him harder to kill. And then you also increase the strength of his big punch. So if you like doing big punch and just, you know, actively using your abilities, then he's pretty fun. So yeah, 4 out of 5. Atlas is pretty fun. Wukong. After his rework, he has become one of the most popular Warframes in the game, and for good reason. Let's go through it, shall we? How hard is he to get? He is not hard to get. 5 out of 5. You get him from your dojo research. You go to your dojo, you buy him from the Tenno lab, and you craft him. Can't be easier. Is he beginner friendly? Yes, he is. 5 out of 5. He has a twin. You just press 1. Look, now there's 2 of you. One of you uses guns, the other uses melee. It's an AI, it moves by itself, it's super good, it kills everything, it's super strong. What's the problem here? There's no problem at all. It's strong, easy to grasp, and good, yeah, cool. He's got Cloudwalker, fantastic mobility skill. You become air, you move forward, you heal yourself while you dash forward. You stun enemies that you dash through. You can use this in spy missions to just go right through, like, just spy cameras and whatnot. It's great. It's great for everything. Defy. You become invulnerable for a while enemies shoot you. And damage you take is turned into bonus armor. So you get bonus armor, so you become stronger and tougher afterward. And you also, like, hit enemies when the effect ends. Is that good? Yeah, that's pretty goddamn good. You got your iron staff. You just plop out an exalted weapon and you hit people in the head with a big staff and they die. Is that good? Yeah, that's good. You got the best passive in the entire game. Cheat death 3 times. You die? Nope, you didn't. Next time you die? Nope, you didn't. Next time you die? Nope, you didn't. Everything is goddamn fantastic. It's self-explanatory. It's easy to use. It's easy to be good with. 5 out of 5. Utility. 4 out of 5. Like I said, he has so many good use cases. He can do everything. He can do spy missions. He can do kill things missions. His twin helps you out with just taking out, enemies in time. He can stun enemies with his number 2 ability. God, he's so good at so many things. He's good at everything. 4 out of 5. Raw power? Nah. No, you're not gonna use Wukong to push, like, the super high level stuff. That's not what he's for. He's here to be good at everything. That's what he does. He's good at everything. But he is not like one of the big, huge monster nuke damage dealers. You're not gonna use him to kill, like, level 5,000 enemies, most likely. But hey, who cares? He's good at everything. So yeah, raw power, 3 out of 5. Fun to play, 4 out of 5, above average. Maybe I would have put him at 5 out of 5. It's close, just because it's such a breeze. Everything's a breeze. Your Celestial Twin is so strong, he helps you out with everything. You got good mobility skills. You got good self-buffing skills. You got a fantastic passive. I guess it's just that, like, his staff, his exalted weapon, isn't that good, all things considered. Not all mods work with it. A lot of people don't really enjoy the moveset of the staff. So, I don't know. When people use the helmet system to sort of improve him, the staff is usually the ability that you replace. But if that's the worst thing you can say about him, that, like, the staff doesn't always feel all that good to use, well, then I guess he's pretty fun to play, right? 4 out of 5. Ivara, the poison frog. The most popular stealth frame in the game. How hard is she to get? She's pretty hard to get. Because you get her by doing spy missions. And normally, to have a chance of getting an Ivara part, you have to successfully open all 3 spy caches in the mission. So you already have to have a stealth frame, or just be really good at doing spy missions, and then just farm them over and over again. So it takes a while. It takes a while to get an Ivara. Beginner friendly, middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. She has her quiver. You have to rotate through different sort of arrows that do different things, that aren't exactly always self-explanatory. Create a cloaking bubble. You can create a dash wire. You can stand on the dash wire to do more damage. Noise arrow to group enemies together because they all walk toward the noise. Sleep arrow, yeah, they're pretty cool, I guess, but it's a bit wonky. Navigator. You shoot and then you activate your number 2 ability and you get to guide the missile. Clunky, limited utility, not that good. Prowl is pretty straightforward. You just go invisible. And it's not a set number of seconds, it's just so long as you have energy, and it just drains per second. But while you're invisible, you can't run, you can't do parkour, you have to walk, but you can roll. So it's a bit tricky sometimes understanding what's going to break invisibility and what's not going to break it. But, you know, it's a very good invisibility skill. And you have your Exalted Weapon, your Artemis Bow, you can pull that out. That's silent, that's not going to break invisibility, and it packs a punch. So, you know, at the worst, you got your invisibility and you got your powerful Exalted Weapon. That's going to take you pretty far just by itself. So yeah, 3 out of 5. Not that complicated to understand. Utility, 5 out of 5. She is excellent at spy missions. Excellent at any mission that requires stealth. She can do some pretty goddamn bonker stuff when it comes to damage dealing as well. You can build her for different things in that regard. Her different arrows, you can cloak teammates, you can cloak defense targets. You can put up a dash wire that you can stand on and that enemies can, or that allies can stand on to do more damage. She provides a lot of good stuff for everyone in the party, and she can do a lot of mission types very efficiently. So yeah, huge utility player, 5 out of 5. Raw power, 4 out of 5. And by that I mean just, hey, any build that's built around finishers and stealth is always going to do a lot of damage. Sitting on the dash wire is also very strong, and you can combine that with some other stuff to just actually carry her up to very, very respectable damage numbers. It's not easy to make her into a huge damage dealer, but it definitely can be done. Fun to play, 4 out of 5. She's great. She's great. She's one of the best stealth frames in the game. The only drawback is that while she's stealthed, you have to walk. Right? You can't do the parkour stuff that your Warframes kind of want to do nowadays. So she's a bit slow while she's invisible. That's the only thing that I kind of don't like about her. But other than that, yeah, she's great. She's super fun. She's super good. 4 out of 5. Nezha, my boy. Nezha, also known as Better Rhino. Is he hard to get? No, he's not hard to get at all. 5 out of 5. You get him from your dojo research. Go to your dojo, go to your Tenno lab, buy him, craft him. That's how hard it is to get Nezha. It's not hard at all. 5 out of 5. Beginner friendly. 5 out of 5. Yeah, it's so easy to get your head around this guy. Look, he has a movement skill. He runs faster. He puts fire on the ground behind him. Enemies take fire damage. Pretty straightforward. Pretty good. Blazing Chakram. You throw a ring at enemies. It bounces around and hits a bunch of different enemies. They take more damage after you've hit them with the ring. They drop orbs when they die after you've hit them with the ring. Okay. Yeah, sure. I understand that. Warding Halo. Defensive skill. You put a ring of fire around yourself. It gives damage absorption. It stuns enemies that are close. It burns them. You have 3 seconds of invulnerability after casting it. Yeah, so just damage reduction basically. You got Divine Spears. You shoot spears out of the ground. They trap enemies. Enemies can't move. Enemies can't do anything. You activate it again to slam them onto the ground, so it's crowd control. You have ability that does crowd control. Crowd control. Crowd control. More damage. More damage. More damage. Armor stripping. Armor stripping. Damage reduction. Invincibility. God damn. It's just use all of his abilities and they do everything. It's kind of cool. It's not that hard to get your head around either. Hey, 5 out of 5. Utility. I'm gonna say 3 out of 5. He's not specifically a utility player, but he does provide some benefits. His Divine Spears can trap enemies. Helpful for you. Helpful for your allies as well. And, you know, leaving fire on the ground when you run around like this, it's just, it stuns enemies for a while. It strips some of their armor when you, like, set them ablaze with these abilities. So, not a lot of, like, super good crowd control abilities, but he's got some. He's got some ways of helping the teams, your teammates as well. Raw power, 4 out of 5. It can be improved even more with the helmet system, but as it is, throwing the Blazing Chakram and giving people more damage vulnerability is strong. The Divine Spears are pretty good. Warding Halo is a very good defensive tool. When you push to like really, really, really high levels of content, you know, it's again, there are other Warframes that can do it better than he can, but he can do some stuff. He's up there. He's up there. He can hang with the big boys. Not the biggest boys, obviously. He's quite small in stature, but he can hang. Fun to play, 5 out of 5. He is so much fun. All of these things with like fire effects feel good, they feel cool. You can target specific enemies to make them more damage vulnerable. You can use it to teleport as well as a mobility skill if you so want. You can run fast, which feels nice. You can get yourself damage reduction so you don't have to worry so much about dying. You can crowd control big groups of enemies. He basically, like, he accomplishes all the same things that Rhino does, but he also has a ton of more stuff he can do that Rhino can't do, and he also just burns everything around him with, like, fire stuff, which makes him twice as cool. So yeah, he's super fun. He's super fun. If you're one of those guys who's just been, you know, playing Rhino forever out of comfort, think about maybe switching over to Nezha. See how it feels. You might be surprised. Next up, we have one of the most popular Warframes in the entire game, Inaros. How hard is he to get? He's pretty hard to get. 2 out of 5. You have to wait until Baruuk arrives, which is once every 2 weeks. Once he arrives, you have to purchase the Sands of Inaros quest to activate the quest to get him. Once you have the quest, you have to place certain missions where you fight certain enemies, and it's kind of unclear which enemies you're supposed to kill to fill a bunch of urns, which takes a long time until you can sort of craft the parts. So it actually is quite clunky and it takes a long time to craft him. He's hard to get. 2 out of 5. Is he beginner friendly? Yes, Inaros is beginner friendly. That's what he has going for him. 5 out of 5. He doesn't have shields, he just has a huge health bar and a huge armor bar. He is just a tank. He is just a tank, and he can also use his Scarab Swarm to give himself even more armor and make himself status immune. So he just, you know, doesn't die. Yeah, that's pretty simple for a beginner. When it comes to his other skills, like, who cares? Yeah, they're complex and they do some cool stuff, but hey, people don't use his abilities. That's why he's beginner friendly. They just use him because he's a tank and he can't die, and then they don't really care about any of this. Which is a shame. But that's it. That's the reality of it. Utility, 1 out of 5. Hey, remember how I said that Inaros players don't use abilities? That's because they don't. That's because they don't. So, he provides 0 utility for the rest of the team. You play Inaros because you like to be a tank and you like to not die, right? And then you just wait for the rest of the team to carry you through the mission, because that's what he does. He just doesn't die. That's his thing. That's what he's good at. Raw power, 2 out of 5. Yeah, no, he's not powerful. He can't do a whole bunch of stuff with his abilities. He can make himself tanky and status immune. He has one good ability to do some damage, which is number 1, Desiccation. The reason for that is because it blinds enemies and it leaves them open for finishers. After you cast number 1 on an enemy, you can go in and hit him with a finisher. That does a lot of damage. That's about it. His Devour, that doesn't do any real damage. It takes forever to kill a single enemy with it. That's kind of dumb. The Sand Shadow that spawned, it's not powerful. It's kind of weak. Sandstorm, yeah, it stun locks enemies, but they just fly around in the air. They don't take any damage. You can't do anything while you're activating it, so it doesn't do any damage. He has 0 damage potential. He's not good at dealing damage. Fun to play, 2 out of 5. Maybe even 1, but let's say 2 out of 5. Just because, hey, maybe it feels fun to just know that you're a big tank and enemies can't hurt you. No, he doesn't have a whole lot going for him, unfortunately. Like, it's just that, like, yeah, you can play him. He won't die. But you're not gonna do anything, and you're not really gonna use your abilities. So, you know, that's Inaros. That's Inaros. Titania. She's cool, right? Hard to get. 3 out of 3. 3 out of 5. You do her through a quest. The quest requires you to scan a bunch of plants on different planets. Okay, it's a bit clunky. It's a bit time consuming, but not really all that hard. It just takes a bit of time. So, 3 out of 5. Beginner friendly. I'm gonna say 3 out of 5 again, because she has one ability that everyone gravitates to, which is her Razor Wing. She becomes tiny and flies around like she's in Arcwing mode. She gets 2 exalted weapons that are pretty strong, and you can just use her number 4 and you'll be fine with that, and she's gonna work. She has some other stuff too, but her other stuff is a bit more complicated to get a grasp on. So she's not that beginner friendly, but on the other hand, this will carry you through most things. So, you know, 3 out of 5. Just use her Razor Wing and you'll be happy about that too. Utility, 4 out of 5. She can do a lot. She has an excellent crowd control ability. It's gonna stun enemies for a long time. It's gonna make them drop their weapons, so they have to pick them up again. You can make yourself status immune. You can make allies status immune. You can use your tribute to hit an enemy with different sort of like buffs that you can like dash through to get. So that's cool too. You have razor flies, so you can make enemies sort of attracted to one of their homies, and then it explodes and dies and stuff. When you are in Razor Wing, you also have razor flies that fly around that attack nearby enemies. Yeah, like she's good for pretty much every mission type. She's great for exterminate, good in defense missions. Anytime you want to like move fast, she's probably the fastest Warframe in the game. It's not Volt, it's not Gauss, it's probably Titania in her arc wing, razor wing form. She's most likely the fastest Warframe in the game. She also has the added utility of being the best Warframe in the game for doing Ascension Halls on Lua. She can clear all of them, like with the zero problem at all. So that's another thing that she's very specialized at. So yeah. Good utility player, 4 out of 5. Raw power, 4 out of 5. She's very strong in Razor Wing mode. Her arc melee is so-so, it's not great, but her guns, the Dex Pixia, are very strong, very potent. Her buffs are not to be sneezed at. They're a bit tricky to get a hang of, but they're actually quite good. Spellbind is a fantastic crowd control ability. It's like she just has a lot of good abilities. No real holes or weaknesses in her game. 4 out of 5. Fun to play, 4 out of 5. Not everyone likes the Razor Wing mode, just zooming around like a teeny tiny pixie or whatnot, but most people do like it. And it is fun. It feels different from most other Warframes. She stands out of the crowd in a pretty cool way. So yeah, 4 out of 5. We've got Nidus, right? Yeah. The infested Warframe. Cool. Is he hard to get? He is very hard to get. 1 out of 5. This guy is a nightmare to farm for. To get the blueprint itself for Nidus, you do a quest called the Glass Gambit. That's not the end of the world, but then in order to get his component parts, there is a single mission called Infested Salvage that you have to farm for, and you have to be in the mission for quite a long time to have a chance to roll for one of his 3 component parts. Getting all 3 it's gonna be a long grind. It's gonna take a long time, and you have to play the same kinda frustrating mission over and over again. He's one of the most annoying Warframes in the entire game to farm for. 1 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Not particularly. 2 out of 5. He has one of those, you know, active sort of resources and stuff you have to balance, which is his mutation stacks. He has to use his abilities to gain mutation stacks, and gaining mutation stacks opens up a lot of stuff for him. So it requires an active playstyle. And all of it requires his abilities to sort of work together. It's extremely synergistic. You have to use everything. Larva groups enemies, and if you kill enemies that are grouped, you have a chance of gaining mutation stacks. Virulence, you stomp the ground and you hit enemies and you gain mutation stacks. So first you group them with larva, then you hit them with the virulence. Parasitic link, you cast it on an ally, and then you get ability strength. You cast on enemies to redirect damage to the enemies instead, so it's a defensive skill as well. You got your Ravenous, so you spawn a big area on the ground, and it spawns maggots, and they eat enemies and burst with infestation, and enemies contribute to mutation stacks and stuff like that. And then he has like the coolest or strongest thing is that, yeah, if he's killed while he has a bunch of mutation stacks, then he isn't killed. He just loses a couple of mutation stacks and he survives. He doesn't die. So he's super tanky and super hard to kill. But he's complex. He's very complex and not that easy to sort of get your head around. So 2 out of 5. Not beginner friendly. Utility, pretty high. 4 out of 5. He's got abilities for grouping enemies together. He's got abilities for crowd control and covering an area, and just you heal and while you're standing in this area, stuff like that. You can give friendly allies, you know, more ability strength. So like he's helpful. He can do some stuff, but it's also a bit tricky because he wants to get his mutation stacks. So if enemies, or like if your allies kill all the enemies before you can get mutation stacks, then you can't build it up, and then you can't do all your cool abilities. So it's sort of like anti-utility in that your allies can be a hindrance to you if you play Nidus. So in some regards, Nidus has an easier time running solo than he has running in a team. He's helping the team, but the team isn't really helping him. Raw power, 4 out of 5, again. And just, you know, so much of it comes down to the mutation stacks and being able to just cheat death forever. He's super tanky, but he can also deal some pretty good damage. Not one of the strongest guys in the entire game in that regard. But definitely a player. 4 out of 5. Fun to play? Yeah, 4 out of 5. He has an active playstyle. He has an extremely synergistic ability kit where all of his abilities work together and you have to use all of them, and you have to sort of plan, and you have to sort of just, you know, pay attention to your stacks and pay attention to what's going on. And with like with some other Warframes, he feels different. He very much brings his own thing to the table, and he has a playstyle that's kind of unique from everyone else's. So yes, fun to play, 4 out of 5. Octavia, the music Warframe. Is she hard to farm for? Yeah, she's kind of hard to farm for. 2 out of 5. First you gotta do a mission. It's called Octavia's Anthem. That's how you get the blueprint. And then you get her parts in a couple of different ways. You have to sort of do like spy missions, and you have to find caches, and you have to do like a music puzzle on Lua, stuff like that. So it's a bit clunky to get all her parts. She's not the easiest Warframe to farm for. 2 out of 5. Beginner friendly, 3 out of 5. She's a bit complicated, but not that complicated. Everything is based around like music, and you have to craft your own song with your mana chord, or you can just use the default one. And then she has 4 abilities that interact with that in different ways. The mallet, which is just something that attracts enemy fire and redirects it at enemies. That's very strong. And hey, that scales well, because the harder the enemies, the more damage gets reflected. A resonator shuts down enemy AI, they forget what they're doing, they just follow the rollerball. If you have your 1 and 2 together, then they follow the rollerball and shoot at it and die. You got your metronome. It pulses the melody from yourself, and you do a couple of different things to give yourself different buffs. Crouching gives you cloak, so if you just spam the crouch button, you will go invisible, and that's how most people play Octavia. And you got your amp, which you drop on the ground and gives you a huge damage multiplier for yourself and for your allies. So, you know, you just these 3, or like all of these abilities are just abilities that are on cooldown. Or like just a certain duration. You just activate the ability, and as soon as it expires, you activate it again. So you just make sure your 1, 2, and 3 are pretty much always active. And if you have to stay in a location for a little while, you put your 4 down there, and everything's fine. So you just make sure they're all always active, and you spam crouch a couple of times now and then to stay invisible. And that's it. That's how you play Octavia. Not that complicated. Utility 5 out of 5. Yes. Because, hey, she is super strong. She can shut down enemy AI. She can provide buffs to the entire team. She can kill high-level content. She can make everything invisible. Damn. What can she do? What mission type is she not good for? She can do everything. Like, I'm not even joking, people. Octavia can do everything. Octavia is known as sometimes as the best Warframe that no one plays. Because, yeah, she is absolutely one of the best Warframes in the game. She can do everything. 5 out of 5 utility. Raw power, 5 out of 5. Yes, she can do everything. She has... Her main source of damage is redirecting enemy damage. That scales with enemies. The tougher the enemies, the more damage gets redirected. It's never gonna stop scaling. She can be permanently invisible. She can shut down enemy AI. She can give herself huge damage amplification. She can do everything. 5 out of 5 power. She's so powerful. Fun to play. Here I'm gonna drop the score a bit and say 3 out of 5, and the reason for that is because, you know, this is the playstyle. This is how you play Octavia. You use the metronome to be invisible. And then you just, you know, let things happen. And you, yeah. It feels a bit samey after a while, and unfortunately, unless you, like, spend a lot of platinum on getting yourself a bunch of different sort of, like, musics and different drums and bass stuff and melodies and sounds you can use, and be like creative with that, you are gonna get bored of listening to the music from her mana chord, because it overwrites the background music of the game, which can be a bit frustrating. So yeah, fun gameplay loop, middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. But like, she's so powerful. She's just so powerful. But in terms of just being fun to play, there are other Warframes that are more fun to play. Harrow. The spooky boy. Right? Oh, he's so cool though. Yeah. How hard is he to get? He is very hard to get. 1 out of 5. Extremely hard to farm for. Extremely hard. First, in order to... Oh, I love how you get his music on the screen. First, in order to get the blueprint, you have to do the Chains of Harrow quest. In order to do the Chains of Harrow quest, you have to have reached the end of the star chart, which is Mott in the Void. And then, once you have that, one of his parts is a very low drop chance from playing high-level defection missions. They are hard, they take a long time. You have to play the mission for, like, I don't know, 20 minutes or something to have one chance of getting the Harrow systems, which sucks. So Harrow is extremely hard to farm for. It's very frustrating. Very tough to get. 1 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Again, 1 out of 5. He is very, very complicated. He has abilities that are not very self-explanatory. Condemned is pretty easy. You lock enemies down and you get shields. Okay. But then you have abilities where you have to sacrifice your own shields to get reload speed and fire rate. And then you convert damage into health. And then you can channel energy. So you sacrifice energy to generate a buff. And then you kill enemies and you get energy back. And headshots get you more energy back. And it's tricky to understand how all of these sort of work together. They do, but it's hard to get a hang of. You have your Covenant, where you have to... Yeah, you do like a buff that absorbs damage, and it converts that damage into a massive crit chance bonus for you and for your allies. And like all of these... If you play them correctly, you use all of these abilities to sort of like buff yourself and debuff yourself and buff yourself and debuff yourself and buff your party and debuff. So it all works and it's all very strong, but it's very tricky. It's very tricky. So no, he's not beginner friendly at all. 1 out of 5. Utility, 5 out of 5. Like I just explained, all of his stuff is just buffs and debuffs and if you have a Harrow on your team, like, yeah, you're gonna have such a good time. You're gonna get huge crit buffs. You're gonna get healing. You're gonna get shields. Enemies are gonna get locked down. He is so solid at just, you know, providing all of the support you need if you play with a competent Harrow player. But yeah, no, very, very strong support Warframe. 5 out of 5. Raw power, 3 out of 5. He's not bad. He's not bad in the power department. The crit chance bonus that he can give is a flat bonus, like base crit chance. Excellent with weapons that normally have a pretty low crit chance because you can artificially inflate it. Like a Kuva Nukor, for example, that has a very low crit chance but very high crit damage. Well, with a Harrow, you can crit just fine with a Kuva Nukor. So you can do some pretty cool stuff in that regard. And a lot of like the buffs and debuffs are very potent as well. Not the strongest, but he's absolutely not weak. Fun to play, 4 out of 5. Because, again, I like complicated Warframes. I like Warframes that aren't very straightforward, but that reward you for learning how to play them correctly and reward you for using like all 4 abilities and knowing how to balance them. So it's a fun gameplay loop where you cycle through all of these abilities and have to use a lot of finesse. If you can do it, you are definitely going to be rewarded for doing it. Yes, Harrow is fun to play. 4 out of 5. Next up, we have Gara, the Glass Warrior. Yeah. Is she hard to get? Yeah, she's a bit hard to get. She's one of the open world Warframes from the Plains of Eidolon. You do a quest to get the main blueprint. You do bounties to get blueprints for the component parts. And then you have to do a lot of the open world stuff in the Plains of Eidolon, like fishing and mining and stuff like that, to get the materials needed to craft her. So it's a bit wonky, takes a bit of effort. It's not unbearable, but there are definitely Warframes that are easier to acquire than Gara. So I'm going to put her at 2 out of 5, even though if you do know what you're doing, it's actually quite manageable even for a new player to get her. But you do have to do exactly You have to know exactly what you're doing. Beginner friendly, I'm gonna say Gara is actually not very beginner friendly because she has a lot of mechanics that are a bit tricky to understand. For a new player, you're obviously gonna gravitate toward her Mass Vitrify, her big glass wall, which is an excellent defensive tool to just protect objectives and just shut enemies down. But she has so much more that she can do besides that. And that's not super well explained when you get her. It's not well explained at all what she actually can do. So she's not that beginner friendly, 2 out of 4. In terms of utility, I rank her pretty high, 4 out of 5. Because she can do a lot of things actually. She can actually do a lot of things. She does have her shield wall, which is great for low and mid-level defensive missions. At high levels it trails off in efficiency because enemies will be able to shoot through it pretty quickly. But it's there, and it does give her a pretty nice, spot as being a defensive Warframe. Then she has her Splinter Swarm, which is, damage reduction. And you can also target, like, for example, a defense objective with this, and give a defense objective damage reduction, which is pretty nice. Or allies, stuff like that. But other than that, she can also do stupid damage. She's one of the strongest damage dealers in the entire game, which you might not know from first glance from looking at her kit. But so she has a lot of versatility, and she can do a lot of different things actually. So yeah, pretty high in the utility department. Raw power, 5 out of 5. Yes, Gara is very, very powerful. The reason for that is because her Splinter Storm also damages enemies that are close to her. And if you combine her number 1, her number 4, and her number 2 ability, you can buff the amount of damage that enemies take from standing close to her. If you cast a Mass Vitrify and you get a wall, and you have Splinter Storm active, and you go to the outside of the wall and you throw your Shattered Lash at the wall to break it, the wall is going to splinter onto you. It's going to hit you with the splinters. It's going to add to the glass that you have around you, and you're going to do more damage. And then when you walk close to an enemy, they die. They die from standing close to you. And you can scale this infinitely. So this can be infinitely strong. You can scale this over time so that you do millions and millions of damage to enemies just from them standing close to you, which actually makes Gara one of the most potent damage dealers in the entire game. She has infinitely scaling damage, which is very strong. 5 out of 5 raw power. Gara is made out of raw power. Fun to play, 4 out of 5. Partly because it's just without even doing this sort of thing, she is a very cool Warframe. She has a very cool design and aesthetics. The glass wall is rad. It feels unique. And once you get the hang of how to play her with the active playstyle of vitrifying enemies, breaking your wall, buffing your Splinter Storm, using Spectral Rage or other subsumed abilities to gain energy, stuff like that, it's very active and it's very fun. So yeah, she's fun to play, and she's very strong. 4 out of 5. Khora, the powerhouse. Right. Is she hard to get? Yeah, she is. She's very hard to get. 1 out of 5. One of the hardest Warframes to farm for in the game. You farm for her by playing Sanctuary Onslaught. And clearing a certain amount of rounds or zones is going to give you a chance to get one of her component pieces or her blueprint itself. For the final part, you have to stay in the mission for like 20 minutes to get one chance of getting one of her parts. And there are 2 different parts that all require you to be, that both require you to be at the 20-minute mark. So yeah, it takes a long time to farm for her. it's pretty hard to get her. 1 out of 5. Beginner friendly, middle of the pack, I'm gonna say 3 out of 5. Not that complicated. She has her beast friend, Venari. You can use this ability to direct him to attack certain enemies. Venari revives after a while if he dies. Pretty, like, just, you know, he moves by himself. You got your whip claw, which you can just crack your whip at enemies and you hit them, and this one can be modded to do absolutely ridiculous damage numbers. It's extremely strong. It's one of the best damage dealers in the game, but even on low levels you kind of understand what it does. You got Ensnare. Great crowd control ability. You whip a target, they get ensnared. It entangles other enemies who are close to it, and whipping enemies who are ensnared, it refreshes it so that it can pull in more enemies. They work together. You got your Strangle Dome, so she loves them whips and them thorns and them barbs. But you create a big dome, enemies get trapped in it, they get shut down, they can't do anything, they're just dangling from the dome. You can also augment this to get more loot from enemies who die while they're in the dome, just like Hydroid's tentacles. So you can do the same thing as Hydroid's tentacles, except that you also have all of this other cool stuff that Hydroid doesn't have. And yeah, hitting Whip Claw on enemies who are in the dome makes them take more damage. Everything is pretty synergistic, it's pretty self-explanatory, works pretty well. Don't have to figure it out all that hard. So yeah, not that bad in terms of being beginner friendly. 3 out of 5. Utility, 5 out of 5. Massive damage dealer. Great crowd control abilities. Extra loot. Shuts down enemy AI. Yeah, now Khora is just one of those Warframes who can do... She can do everything, and she can do it well. Not only can she do everything, she's also good at doing everything. It's quite unique. Yeah, 5 out of 5. Raw power, 5 out of 5. Holy shit. She's like people, the Whip Claw. If you build it correctly, you have a good stat stick that gives it the damage that it can do. And you whip people who are in the strangle. Like, you have no idea how strong this is. You have no idea how absolutely ridiculous these damage numbers can get. One of the strongest damage dealers in the game. Raw power, 5 out of 5. Fun to play, 3 out of 5, I'm gonna say. It's because she's not that complex, all things considered. Venari moves by himself, so, you know, no surprises there. And then it's like, she has crowd control and shutting down and just locking enemies in place, and she whips them. That's what she does. She ensnares enemies, either with ensnare or with the dome, and then she whips them. And then she traps enemies in her thorn, and then she whips them. And then she wraps them up in her barbed wire, and then she whips them. That's it. That's how you play Khora. You trap enemies and then you whip them. It's not boring or anything, but there are more interesting Warframes in terms of just how fun the actual gameplay loop is. So, in that regard, 3 out of 5. Next up we have Revenant, the sentient-inspired Warframe. So, is he hard to get? He's kinda hard to get. You have to do the Mask of the Revenant quest, and then you have to do somewhat high-level bounties in the Plains of Eidolon to get the component parts. And then crafting the component parts also takes some pretty high-level resources, such as a bunch of sentient cores and Cetus Wisps. Stuff that can be a bit hard to grind for as a new player. So yeah, a bit tricky to get. 2 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Actually, no. I'm gonna say he's a bit tricky to get a hang of because he's kind of complex. He's very synergistic. All of his stuff works together, so you have to understand his entire kit to understand how he plays. Can be a bit clunky for a new player to sort of like get a grasp on. You have to enthrall enemies, turn enemies into thralls that are sort of like under your command. And then you reave through enemies to regain health and shields and damage them. And reaving through thralls damages them a lot. You can one-shot enemies no matter like how high level they are, if you just have enough power strength. Mesmer Skin literally turns you immortal. You're just straight up immortal so long as Mesmer Skin is active. And you can recharge Mesmer Skin by reaving through thralls. So like, it all works together. And then he has his Dance Macabre, his Spin to Win, which is excellent for just melting low-level enemies. Or mid-level as well. You can melt high level, I guess, but it's very energy hungry. So you're gonna have to like do it for too long. It's not gonna be that efficient. So this one doesn't really synergize all that well with the rest, but other than that, like it all works together. But it takes a while to sort of get the hang of it. So maybe not super beginner friendly. Maybe put him at 3, but let's keep it at 2 for now. Utility 4 out of 5. You have to build him a bit different for different things. If you build him towards using his 1, 2, and 3, he's just a killing machine. That's what he is. He just kills things. But his Enthrall does provide some crowd control because enemies turn into allies and they start infighting, stuff like that. And the Dance Macabre obviously is great for just wiping out entire rooms of enemies, which is nice for just letting him like be pretty useful in just, you know, defensive missions as well, actually. So yeah, he can do a couple of different things, and he can do a couple of things pretty well. Raw power 5 out of 5. Yes, Revenant is one of the most powerful Warframes in the entire game, and the reason for that is because he can kill any enemy in the game with Reave. You turn it into a thrall, and if you have 250% power strength, when you Reave through it, it's gonna deal 100% of its health as damage, so it's gonna insta-die. You can insta-kill any regular enemy in the game. Just first turn them into a thrall, and then Reave through them. That's it. And Mesmer Skin, as long as it's active, you are literally immortal. You can't die. And there are ways of recharging this so it doesn't run out of charges. So he can't die, and he can kill any enemy no matter how high level. Is that good? Yeah, that's pretty strong. That's pretty powerful. 5 out of 5 for raw power. Fun to play? Hey, 5 out of 5. Revenant is so underestimated here because it's super active. You gotta keep track of your thralls, you gotta pay attention to it, and you gotta like keep on enthralling enemies. You gotta pay attention to your immortality and your Mesmer Skin. You gotta find your targets for your Reave. So all of this is super active and super like attentive, and you get such a good payoff if you do it correctly, and things just die all around you. And then you also have your number 4 ability, which is something completely different, which is just for melting low-level enemies very easily. And it just also sort of like just, hey, feels good. All in all, he's a very fun Warframe to play. Don't sleep on Revenant. He's cool and he's fun. Check him out. Garuda. Yeah. I guess she's the vampire frame now. Originally, Revenant was supposed to be the vampire frame, but I guess Garuda is actually sort of the vampire frame. Oh well. Is she hard to farm for? Yeah, she's hard to farm for. 2 out of 5. She's another one of those open world Warframes, just like Gara, except in her case you also have to farm for a bunch of toroids, as it's called, and they are kind of like clunky and a hassle to grind for. So yeah, Garuda is quite tricky to farm for. 2 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Absolutely not. 1 out of 5. She is very complicated, very complex, very unique in her playstyle. The reason for that is because she has a passive that means she does more damage the lower her health is. Maxes out when she's at 2 health. She also has a certain specific weapon that only she has, Garuda's talons that get equipped if she doesn't have a melee weapon equipped. And Garuda's talons are actually quite good. So she got your Dread Mirror. You activate it by attacking an enemy with this ability. You get a mirror in front of you. It captures damage. So it's very good to like just, you know, protect you. You can actually insta-kill enemies with this if they're below a certain health threshold. And it's like short as a bomb that you can throw, stuff like that. But yeah, it's a defensive skill from attacks that come from the front of you. Blood Altar. You can turn an enemy into a Blood Altar that heals you by standing close to it. Bloodletting. You can drain your own health to generate energy. So with this ability, you can drain your health down to like almost zero. So you're at 2 health. You get a bunch of energy. Blood Altar lets you get the health back by standing next to the altar. So these two work together to make sure you always have energy, kinda. And you're at low health when you want to be at low health. And then you can be at high health when you want to be at high health. Seeking Talons. You target enemies with a big sort of reticule. You can charge to make the reticule bigger. They get hit, they take some damage, but they also get like automatic slash procs from other attacks. They become marked, and marked enemies, whatever attack you do against them, also does like slash procs. A couple of slash ticks, bleeding ticks, and bypasses armor, stuff like that. It's brutally strong. But it's tricky to sort of get the hang of. So it's a very exciting loop of playing her, where you have to constantly drain your health, constantly get your health back, constantly hit enemies with this thing to make them susceptible to damage. You build up your Dread Mirror to instantly kill low health targets, get a big explosive bomb that you can throw on enemies, protect yourself from damage, and you have to be super mobile and move around and just... it requires a ton out of you as a player. So much to keep track of. So it's not beginner friendly at all, unfortunately. 1 out of 5. Utility, 3 out of 5, I'm gonna say. The reason for that is because of her number 2 ability and her number 4 ability. Her number 2 ability, the Blood Altar, it doesn't just benefit you, it benefits your entire team. Anyone who stands close to it will get healed. Seeking Talons. Marked enemies, other allies can also take advantage of this to hit enemies with guaranteed slash procs, deal tons of damage. So both offensively and defensively, she has some stuff that just works in a team setting. But she doesn't stand out as a team player. So utility, 3 out of 5. Raw power, 4 out of 5, and that's because of the Seeking Talons and the Dread Mirror. If you play her correctly, she actually does a lot of damage. She can shred through enemies very, very quickly. But it requires a lot of finesse, and a lot of it requires her to be at low health. So she is unfortunately always close to dying, and it can be tricky to keep her alive at higher levels of content. But if you know how to do it, then she's definitely got the power. And fun to play? Yes, among the highest in my regard. 5 out of 5. She is one of the Warframes in the game that requires you to have the most active playstyle. You use all 4 of her abilities, you spam them, you cycle through them constantly. You are always paying attention to everything happening around you. You are jumping around, you are proccing enemies with slash procs, you are finding new targets for your Blood Altar, for your Bloodletting, for your Dread Mirror, for your Seeking Talons. It is a joy to play Garuda when she clicks and you sort of understand what you're supposed to do. So much fun. One of the most well-designed Warframes in the game when it comes to just pure fun. 5 out of 5. Baruuk! Oh, this guy is hard to farm for. we're gonna put this guy at 1 out of 5. The reason for that is that you can't even farm for him until you have reached the maximum rank with Solaris United to access another syndicate where you can purchase him from the syndicate store. So Baruuk is extremely hard to farm for, unfortunately. Beginner friendly? No! Not at all. Again, 1 out of 5. He is known as the pacifist Warframe, and he has to balance between not damaging enemies and damaging enemies to build stuff up. As you can see, he has restraint as a sort of resource, where depending on if you have high restraint or low restraint, he can do different things. It's quite complicated. And you dodge projectiles as a defensive ability, but it only works when you're not attacking, stuff like that. You sleep enemies, but then they wake up again when you attack them. You have little daggers that disable enemy weapons. Sure. But then you have his 4, which is his big punchy fists, the Serene Storm. Which you can activate when you have eroded your restraint. And then you can beat people up with your exalted weapon. And it's one of the best exalted weapons in the entire game. It's very strong. And then you have to sort of like use abilities that build restraint or deplete restraint to balance everything back and forth. It's very complicated. It's not that easy for a new player to get the grasp of at all. So yeah, he's hard to understand. 1 out of 5. Utility, 4 out of 5. Yeah. He is very good at providing support. He can buff allies. They can also get the orbiting daggers. Good for damage reduction. Good for destroying enemy weapons. He can sleep enemies. Also just, helps make missions super easy. Stuff like that. And he also packs a punch. So yeah, he very versatile. Can do a lot of stuff. It's just that most people, don't play him, so they don't know about this. Raw power, 4 out of 5. And this comes down to his exalted weapon. He's a big old punch boy. And he actually dishes out a lot of damage. He hits really hard with these and sends enemies flying, and he just shoots waves of radial damage with these fists. They're super cool. Combined with all of his like crowd controlling and defensive abilities, he's quite strong. He's quite strong actually. Fun to play. I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but I love active playstyles. 4 out of 5. I love having to pay attention to meters and resources and using abilities to either raise or lower resources and getting payoffs for playing the Warframe correctly. It speaks to me. It speaks to me a lot. So this is the kind of Warframe design that I really like. So yeah, fun to play. 4 out of 5. Hildryn. Just like with Baruuk, who I just talked about, Hildryn has the exact same issue. You can't farm for her until you have maxed ranked the syndicate Solaris United, so that you can get access to another syndicate that lets you farm for Hildryn. She's one of the hardest Warframes to farm for in the game, so easy to get, 1 out of 5. Beginner friendly? I'm gonna say yes, and she is one of the few of the later release Warframes that is pretty beginner friendly, and that is pretty straightforward in how she works. She has one unique thing in that she doesn't have energy. She instead uses her own shields as a resource, and then she has abilities that she can use to recharge shields, stuff like that. So there's some finesse and some trickery to how she works, but mostly it's just you have a pulsing ability that drains enemy shields and armor and gives it back to her and removes status effects. Cool. You have an area effect that makes enemies take radiation damage, and you create a shield aura around allies. You have a huge area of effect thing with Aegis Storm that immobilizes enemies, and then they release energy orbs when they die, so you get more energy, stuff like that. It's not that complex, it's not that complicated, so she's actually pretty beginner friendly, all things considered. 4 out of 5. Utility, I'm gonna say 3 out of 5. She actually is a decent team player. She can, status cleanse allies, which is helpful when she does it to herself as well, and draining enemy shields and armor. She can give allies extra shields, stuff like that. And she has some sort of methods of, even though her Aegis Storm is kind of bad, it's very clunky and it takes time to use, she does have it, and she can use it to sort of crowd control and lock down an area. So she has a bit of utility in that regard. In some sort of defensive ways, she actually, is pretty helpful, which is neat. Raw power, middle of the pack. A lot of the later released Warframes are actually quite potent and quite strong, and can just, do some pretty stupid damage numbers. Hildryn can't really do that, not by yourself. You'd have to use like the helmet system and take advantage of certain ability interactions. But just from her base kit, she's not like one of the huge damage dealers in the game. She's very tanky, she's good at support, and she can do a lot of things. But when you come to like the really high levels, the damage number starts trailing off, and she can't keep up anymore. Fun to play, also middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. She, she can do all of these area of effect and auras and hit people around them. But if you just have all of these aura effects and just have like these pulsing effects and AoE effects, it feels a bit samey in a way. You just use all of your abilities, you just spam them and just keep them active, spam them, and just sometimes use. She also has like her number 1, which is like an exalted weapon in a way, like a secondary weapon, but it's so-so. It's so-so. It has an augment mod that lets you destroy nullifier fields, but it's not great. So she has like 2 abilities that are so-so, and then she has 2 abilities that are just area of effect. So it's not the most exciting gameplay. Middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. Wisp, another new, very popular Warframe. So to get her, you have to farm the Ropa Lowlist boss fight, but in order to unlock the Ropa Lowlist boss fight, you have to have done the Chimera prologue main quest story. So, and that's pretty far into the game. So it's gonna take a long time until you reach the point where you can farm for her. So not the easiest Warframe to farm for. Let's call that 2 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Yeah, decently. Her abilities are kind of like, there's some synergy between them, but not like to an extreme amount. So you have your reservoirs, which is her bread and butter. You plop down these moats on the ground, and they provide buffs to anyone who gets close to them. And they last basically forever, right? You can drop down so many of them in a mission. They're great. You got the Will o' the Wisp, which is a movement ability. It can be used for some crowd control. It does give a 3-second invulnerability when you cast it, so if you just double tap it and cast it really, really quickly, you can just make yourself invulnerable for 3 seconds, which is nice. You can also use it to transport your motes. You got your Breach Surge, which is a very popular ability. Interestingly enough, though, Wisp is a Warframe who can't really take advantage of Breach Surge the same way that some other Warframes can. So it's kind of worse on her than it is on some others. But it's a very good crowd control tool that stuns enemies and just makes little surge sparks jump around between enemies. And it comes with a damage multiplier on certain hits. So it's got its little uses, mainly for crowd control. And then you have her Soul Gate, which is you open a portal to the sun and shoot enemies. And this ability is very straightforward and very fun to use, but also probably her least good ability, unfortunately. But it's not that complicated. So, yeah, decently beginner-friendly, 3 out of 5. Utility, 5 out of 5. And that is because of the reservoirs, because these things do so much. They increase movement speed for Wisp and her allies. They increase attack speed and fire rate. They heal you. They increase your maximum health. They crowd control enemies. They stun enemies. All of this with a single ability that you can just plop down on multiple spots in a map. They're so good. These modes are just so good. And it overshadows the fact that the rest of her kit isn't great. The rest of her abilities aren't all that good, but no one cares because the reservoirs are so good that everyone loves to have a Wisp on the team just because she has this ability. That's how good it is. This ability alone makes her 5 out of 5 in utility. Raw power, I'm gonna say 3 out of 5. She has some stuff that she can do. She has a very cool passive, which means that she's invisible while she's airborne. You can take advantage of that if you just parkour a whole lot and just jump around. Enemies can't see you, which gives her a ton of survivability and actually makes her quite durable. You have your Breach Surge that you can take advantage of in certain ways. If you really want to max out her damage numbers, you kind of have to use the helmet system. Probably get rid of the Soul Gate and replace it with something more useful. So, she's not without power, but she's definitely not one of the most powerful Warframes in the game. So I'm going to put her at 3 out of 5. Fun to play. Here I'm going to go against the grain. I know she's very popular, but I'm going to put this pretty low at 2 out of 5. And the reason for that is, you know, like I've just said, she has one good ability in my mind, and that's the Reservoirs, which happens to be one of the best abilities in the entire game. But that's how you play Wisp. You just plop down Reservoirs. And these other abilities are okay. They're okay, but they're not great. Will-o'-the-Wisp is fine, but it's not the most exciting ability in the world. Breach Surge is better on other Warframes than it is on Wisp. And Soulgate is just kind of bad. So I actually don't think she's the most fun Warframe in the game to play. Unfortunately. Now, Gauss is cool. Okay? This guy is so goddamn cool. He runs fast, but that's not all he can do. Is he hard to farm for? Yeah, he's kind of hard to farm for. You have to farm the Disruption mission on Sedna to get his parts. So that's the second to last location in the star chart, besides the final Void missions. So you gotta be pretty far into the game to farm for him. And then you have to play the Disruption mission for probably for quite some time. And it's not the easiest mission in the game either, but that's how you farm for him. So there are other Warframes in the game that are definitely easier to get than Gauss, so let's put him at 2 out of 5. Is he beginner friendly? No, he's not. Again, 2 out of 5. He is a complicated Warframe. He has some weird abilities that it takes some time to understand how they work, and they're not exactly self-explanatory. Yeah, he can run really fast, but it also charges his battery, which is a resource. He can give himself kinetic plating, which gives him damage reduction. That drains his battery. He can do an AoE attack that does cold damage, or blast damage, or fire damage, depending on how you use it. And you can cast it in a couple of different ways. And it can both drain the battery and charge the battery, depending on what you do. By running and moving, you charge the battery. He has Redline, which overclocks himself and supercharges his abilities to give himself fire rate, attack speed, reload speed, holster rate. And if you cast Redline when you're at like 100% battery, and then you charge it past the red line, you get super zappy zap, just electricity around, and his other abilities like stop casting energy, and they do new things. Thermal Sunder starts armor stripping, stuff like that. It's so complicated. But it all super works well together. It's so well designed. But it's also really, really complicated. No, he's not beginner friendly. Utility, 3 out of 5. He actually does have a couple of different things he can do in different mission types. Obviously, he's just strong by himself. But also he has the Thermal Sunder, which means that he can like pretty much shut down areas with like just freezing enemies solid so that they can't move, stuff like that. Strip their armor, burn them for some more stun stuff. You know, he can do some cool stuff. But he's not mainly a utility player. So, middle of the pack, 3 out of 5. Raw power, 5 out of 5. Gauss is one of the most powerful Warframes in the entire game if you play him correctly and you understand how his stuff works with the battery. If you do the correct things with the red line and supercharge it and all of that stuff, you can completely shut down enemies. You can freeze them solid. Not just slow them, freeze them solid. You can strip 100% of their armor. You can give yourself 100% damage reduction. You can even use his augment now for his Mach Rush to crash into abilities to deal crazy damage. And running through them, and just like everything works so well together. And when you use it all together, your enemies stop existing, basically. You don't even pay attention to them. You don't have to, because they can't do anything to you. You just move around at supersonic speeds, and you're basically immortal and a crowd-controlling god, and you're just destroying enemy defenses. And man, he's so strong. Do not sleep on Gauss. If you have not tried him out yet, take some time to learn how he works and just play with him for a while, and you'll see just how good this guy is. He's crazy. Which brings us to the final point, which is fun to play. And with everything I just told you, you can kind of probably understand why I'm going to put this guy at 5 out of 5. Yes, he's fun to play. Super active playstyle. You use all of his abilities. They all synergize together. They all give huge rewards and payoffs for playing them correctly. You have resource juggling, and you have so many different things he can do. It feels so good to play Gauss the way he's supposed to be played. If you haven't tried him out, just, oh my god, he's so fun. He's so fun and he's so good. Jesus Christ, 5 out of 5. Alright, so we got Grendel, and Grendel is in a bit of a weird spot. But let's get to these things one at a time. Hard to farm? Yes. Might be the hardest Warframe to farm for in the entire game, which is one of the explanations for his very low play rate. 1 out of 5. In order to start farming for him, you have to have access to arbitrations, which means you have to have unlocked every single node in the entire star chart. Once you have him, once you have arbitrations, you have to play arbitrations. Get a bunch of Vitus Essence. With that, you can buy keys to the nodes that you use to farm his parts. And then to farm his parts, you have to play these missions, where you have to complete pretty high level missions without using any mods at all. Which is a very difficult challenge. Can be done solo, but it's extremely hard to do solo. Most people have to do it in a group to make it feasible. But even then, it's hard. So yeah, this guy is very, very hard to farm for. Extremely hard to farm for. Probably the hardest Warframe to farm for in the entire game. 1 out of 5. Maybe even 0 out of 5. Beginner friendly? No, not really. 2 out of 5. He can eat enemies. Okay. And then enemies take toxin damage while they're inside his belly. And then he can do some other stuff with enemies while they're inside his belly. He can feast on them and give himself different sort of buffs that you can cycle between. You can get energy multipliers or armor multipliers or damage multipliers. He can regurgitate them and shoot them out and hit enemies with them. He can, while he has enemies in his belly, turn himself into a roller ball and roll around and smack around enemies like that. Sure. So it kind of makes sense from the whole first eat enemies and then do stuff while you have enemies in your gut. But it's a bit tricky to get the hang of and understand like what you're supposed to do. So it's not self-explanatory. Utility? Yes! Quite a lot. 4 out of 5. Believe it or not. Partly because he can buff the team and the buffs aren't bad. Energy multipliers aren't bad. Armor multipliers aren't bad. Damage multipliers aren't bad. So that's something he can do for the party. And with the feast, hell, he can just suck enemies in, right? Then you don't have to worry about them. You don't have to deal with them. They'll just stay in his belly until they die, or until he just runs out of energy and spits them out. But he's also super tanky with just his basic abilities. He's got really high armor. He's got really high health. And he's got a teeny tiny amount of shields, which actually makes it so that he has an easy time abusing shield gating to give himself even more survivability. So he can actually like be helpful in quite a lot of different scenarios. So yeah, it's not bad in that regard at all. Raw power, pretty high. 4 out of 5. Like there's like people just haven't been experimenting with him and just trying to learn what he can do or not. The reason why he has such high power is because Feast actually has scaling damage. Part of the formula for calculating the damage of Feast is dependent on enemy level to figure out how much toxin damage it does. So the higher the enemy level, the more toxin damage this ability does. It just scales by itself. As you stay in a mission longer and enemies get higher level, this ability gets stronger by itself. And it's just gonna keep on scaling forever. So again, Grendel is one of those Warframes who has infinitely scaling damage, which by itself makes him pretty good. He has drawbacks, most particularly when it comes to energy maintenance and making sure you have enough energy, because the more enemies you have in your belly, the faster your energy drains, and then you have to spit them all out to reset it, stuff like that. But the damage is definitely there. He can deal really, really stupid amounts of toxin damage to really, really high level enemies. Don't sleep on it. Grendel can actually do some stuff, okay? 4 out of 5. Fun to play? 3 out of 5. I'm gonna say he's different. He's very different. He's got a different playstyle, but it is clunky. It requires a lot of build around. It requires a lot of high-end, high-level stuff to make it work. Just in his base form, it's gonna be tricky, particularly because everything is so energy hungry. And honestly, his pulverized ball is a bit of a letdown. It's very hard to navigate with it. It feels janky. It feels more like a gimmick than an actual super usable ability. His regurgitate is also completely useless. This ability is completely and utterly useless. Just never use it. That's basically it. So he's got 2 good abilities, 1 useless ability, and 1 ability that doesn't feel great right now. So, fun to play? It's not the worst. He's very unique, but it doesn't work everything the way it's supposed to. So, 3 out of 5. Protea. Yeah, the Time Warframe. She hard to get? Kinda. You have to, let's say 2 out of 5 on this. You have to do the Deadlock Protocol quest. which is fine. You can access the Deadlock Protocol quest after just doing the Solaris United quest. But the Deadlock Protocol quest itself is pretty easy up until the final mission where you have to fight like a Protea Spectre. A lot of people think that's pretty hard. Once you've done that, you get her main blueprint, but then you have to do a bunch of challenges in the Granum Void, in the Corpus Ship tile set. And you have to do it in different difficulty levels on different planets, like easy, medium, and hard. The hard ones you have to get up to, like, I don't know, Pluto or something to access. And they can be quite challenging if you don't know how to play them correctly or what you're supposed to be doing. So she can be a bit time-consuming to farm for, not the easiest. Beginner-friendly? Yes, somewhat. 3 out of 5. It's not that tricky. The grenade fan is pretty self-explanatory. She has 2 different grenades based on if you tap or if you hold. Either you hurt enemies with a bunch of shrapnel, or you send out shield generators, which protect you and protect your companions and your allies. So defense or offense, depending on what you need. Blaze Artillery is just a huge, massive damage dealer. You throw out this little turret. It's gonna last for a couple of seconds. It hurts enemies. The more enemies it hits, the more damage it does. So if you have a lot of enemies grouped together that get hit, the damage numbers get stupid. You got the dispensary, you plop down a thing on the ground, it gives you a bunch of orbs. Health orbs, universal orbs, ammo packs. Great. Very useful. And then she has her tricky ability, which is Temporal Anchor, kind of like Tracer in Overwatch. You activate it, and then you move around and do stuff, and then you activate it again to move back in time to where you were from the start. It's tricky to make this work really well, but it's fun, but it's wonky. But it's not that her kit of stuff isn't all that complicated to understand. It's pretty straightforward. 3 out of 5. Utility, 5 out of 5. She has so many good support things she can do. Dispensary is fantastic for the entire team. Gives health, gives ammo, gives shields to everyone. It lasts for 25 seconds, then you can plop down some more. It's just great. Dispensary is just great. Grenade fan is okay for damage dealing and like a bit of crowd control in that regard. And it can also be used to help allies with just healing and stuff and extra shields. And Blaze Artillery can do such fantastic spot damage. So she is useful in many different mission types. Great asset to any team. Raw power, 5 out of 5. And that it comes down to Blaze Artillery. The damage numbers on Blaze Artillery are crazy. They are absolutely crazy. She can just take these to such high levels. Temporal Anchor is also actually a pretty decent survivability tool. Because if you die while it's active, you just rewind, right? You can also use your grenades to give yourself more shields and stuff. Like she is pretty good. She's pretty good at everything. It's very strong. Very strong. 5 out of 5. So strong. Fun to play. Above average. 4 out of 5. Not bad at all. She's got so many different things going for her. And all of these abilities function so differently from each other. And they all do completely different things. But they all sort of combine into a pretty nice kit. It's a pretty nice package of abilities that pretty much just cover all bases. Yeah, no, they're fun. She's fun. Yeah, she's fun. 4 out of 5. She's fun. She's just fun, people. Then there is Zaku, the broken Warframe. The community designed Warframe. Made from a community design contest. Oh my god. I hadn't noticed until now that like this specific Cyandana, it's not this isn't great. You should stop rubbing yourself that way while we're doing this video, Zaku. Oh my I had not noticed until now that in this anime Okay. Oh, I should probably tell someone. Okay. Okay. I have to focus. I'm sorry, people. Professionalism. All right, Zaku. How hard is he to get? He's very, very hard to get. 1 out of 5. Extremely hard to farm for. Number 1, you gotta do the Heart of Deimos thing to get his blueprint. You have to do Deimos bounties to get his component parts. But one of his component parts requires Gravimag systems. I think it is. One of the systems, Atmos systems, Gravimag systems, I don't care. One of them. And in order to get that resource, you have to be able to do heists in Fortuna, which means you have to be max rank with Solaris United. So you have to have maxed out a syndicate on Fortuna to be able to get that part, which puts him at the same level as Warframes like Baruuk and Hildryn in order to be able to get him. So one of the hardest Warframes to farm for in the entire game, 1 out of 5. Beginner friendly? Not exactly. I'm going to put him at 2 out of 5 because some of his things are kind of, clunky to sort of use correctly. Zada's Whisper is pretty straightforward. You activate it and then your weapons do extra void damage. Just your weapons, not your other abilities. Grasp of Loki is huge damage dealer. You steal weapons from enemies and then you have them. And they shoot back, and they deal damage. And this scales based on enemy level. The higher the level of the enemies, the more damage the weapons do. You have the Lost, which is 3 different abilities. You can cycle between them. Only one of them is really good, which is the Gaze, because it strips armor. The other 2 aren't all that good. But it's a bit tricky to sort of understand what that's about. And then you have the Vast Untime, which is he shatters his outer pieces and he becomes a Skelly boy. Runs around like a little Skelly man, right? He gets a dodge chance, which just means that there's a 75% ability, 75% chance that enemy hits won't hit. That it'll just miss. So it's not damage reduction. You get hit by 4 shots. 3 of them are going to miss. 1 of them is going to hit. If that one shot is strong enough to one-shot you, well, then I guess you die. Right? But it also freezes the duration of your other abilities. Which is kind of cool, I guess. But it's tricky to make that work well. And understand how everything is supposed to synergize. But it's kind of cool, I guess. Utility, low. I'm going to say 2 out of 5. He's not... he doesn't have a whole lot of stuff in his kit that I think is super great in sort of like a team setting. You got the Lost with the different abilities that you can sort of like control enemies with. Yeah, corrupt enemies into allies. Whoop-de-doo. Most of these abilities are just for himself and for buffing himself and just he's pretty good for clearing high level content like endurance missions, stuff like that. But he's a bit limited in which different settings he's really useful in. But that takes us to raw power, 5 out of 5. And that is, again, because like I've said before, any Warframe that has infinitely scaling damage, he's got some stuff going for him, right? But this guy, gal, it, them, they, let's go for they do not just have an ability with infinitely scaling damage. They also have an ability that can strip enemy armor. And those 2 things taken together means you have violently strong damage output. Violently strong, where you can clear enemies up to basically any level. Doesn't matter how high of a level you get to, you're still going to be able to kill enemies just fine. So, in terms of pure damage, Zaku is up there with the best. But that's about it. That's where Zaku shines. Not in many other areas, unfortunately. And fun to play, I'm gonna put Zaku pretty low. I'm gonna put Zaku at a 2. I just don't enjoy the playstyle of, like, it's not you killing enemies with your abilities. You just steal their guns and then you just run around and the guns auto shoot on enemies and they die. And you just sort of like just I don't know, you do some armor stripping, that's fine. And you be a skelly man. But it feels pretty sort of passive. It feels like you're just running around and that's it. And enemies die. It's not super active. It's not that fun of a gameplay loop. Might come down to personal preference. I just don't think Zaku is particularly fun to play. Oh well. Maybe that's just me. And finally, we come to the currently latest addition to the game, which is Lavos, the Alchemist Warframe. Came out very recently. So how does Lavos stack up? Well, how hard is he to get? He was easy to get when he was released. He came with Operation Orphix Venom, where he was just, part of the mission reward for that event. Now that Orphix Venom is over, he is going to be added to the store in Deimos, Father's store, where you can simply just purchase him and his parts with Entrati standing. That being said, he requires some pretty complicated resources to actually craft his parts, which makes him somewhat difficult to farm for, as it is. So we're going to put him at 2 out of 5. Not the worst in terms of new Warframes, which tended to be even harder to farm for, but not the easiest either. Beginner friendly, I'm going to put him in the middle here, 3 out of 5. Despite the fact that he has very unique mechanics, they're also pretty self-explanatory. Lavos does not use energy. Instead, he uses cooldowns. His ability has cooldowns. It makes him unique. He's the only Warframe who works this way. So he's got a whip that he can hit enemies with, and that's how he heals himself. He's got a Vile Rush, which is a mobility skill, and it also drops a bunch of cold splashes that freeze enemies in its tracks. Okay, also pretty straightforward. He's got the catalyze thing, which is he launches it, and it damages double for each element afflicting enemies. So it's like condition overload. First, you want to do a bunch of other stuff on enemies so that they have a bunch of different status effects affecting them. Then you cast this on them, and they die. That's how that works. You got his transmutation probe. He launches a probe forward in a straight line. He can stop it whenever he wants to. And for any enemy hit with this, they take electricity damage, but they also reduce the cooldowns on his other abilities. So it's his method of cooldown reduction. Okay, I kind of get it then, right? You just loop these 4 abilities, right? And just keep track of your cooldowns. And then also, every ability has its own element. If you hold down the ability instead of tapping, instead you imbue your next ability cast with that element. So it's a bit tricky. It's not easy, but at the same time, it's like you get the hang of it pretty quickly once you start using him. So I'm still gonna put it at like 3 out of 5. I think it's pretty well designed, all things considered. Utility, 3 out of 5. The reason for this is because currently, like, he has some stuff that helps in a team setting. He has a lot of like AoE effects and stuff like that, and crowd control and all of that. But the problem with him is that he needs to have a lot of enemies around that he can hit with his transmutation probe in order to reduce his own cooldowns. So he has the same thing as Nidus, the sort of anti-synergy with a team. Nidus himself works better solo than he does in a team. And Lavos is a bit the same way, unfortunately. So he helps the team, but the team does not help him. In fact, the team hinders him, and he works better if the team isn't there, unfortunately. So that's kind of what's holding him back from having a good utility role. But he can do a bunch of different stuff, and he can help out in a couple of different ways as well. So 3 out of 5. Raw power, 4 out of 5. Don't sleep on his ultimate ability, his Catalyze. If you prep it correctly and make sure that enemies are just covered by a bunch of different status effects, this thing does an absolutely stupid amount of damage. You can melt things on very, very high level content. You have really good crowd control. Enemies get hit by like 3 cold procs. They're basically frozen solid by this. You have one of the best healing abilities in the entire game. If you if you hit like at least 4 enemies or something, you're just gonna heal back to full health. He is one of the tankiest Warframes in the game. He has stupid high armor values, stupid high health values. So he's got crowd control, healing, damage. He's got such a strong kit, and he can go so far. He's very strong. Don't sleep on him. 4 out of 5. That's his raw power. And fun to play. Man, he's such a breath of fresh air. He is so unique. He plays differently from all other Warframes in the game. Again, active playstyle. Pay attention to everything you're doing. Imbue attacks with different elements. Cycle through them. Pay attention to your cooldowns. Get very well rewarded for playing correctly. Get very well rewarded for using all of your abilities. Get these huge payoffs. And just feel very strong and very tanky and very, very invulnerable and very powerful while you're playing him. He is extremely fun to play. One of the most fun to play Warframes in the entire game. 5 out of 5. Well, that's the entire list for now. Next up, the spooky Wraith Warframe is the next one to be added to the game, so we'll see how that finishes up. This is my very subjective take on it. I'm sure you're not gonna agree with everything, but I hope this was also maybe a bit of a resource for a new player, kind of like just wanting to know what they should be focusing on. So, hey, thanks for watching. We're gonna do this again next year. And by that time, I'm probably, like I said, also going to take into account Helminth infusions and the potential for making Warframes better with that when I do my rankings. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow with something completely different.